Hello, and welcome to the Forbes Next 1000 Summit, celebrating the most innovative entrepreneurs. We're excited to have you be part of the conversation. You can submit questions for our speakers and interact with each other under the Ideas tab in Slido by clicking the Join the Conversation button located at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, or by visiting slido.com from your mobile device and entering the code NEXT1000. Check out the official Forbes Next 1000 Instagram filter presented by Square. Scan the QR code to launch the experience on your mobile device and share a photo or video to your story using hashtag Next1000. Now, please welcome Maneet Ahuja, Senior Editor, Forbes.
Welcome, everyone, to our inaugural celebration of one of our most important franchises here at Forbes, the Next 1000, in partnership with Square. We've all witnessed the struggles faced by entrepreneurs and small business owners as a result of the pandemic. And while venture-backed startups traditionally have gotten the lion's share of the attention, with the Next 1000, we set out on a year-long journey to shine a spotlight on the ambitious sole proprietors, self-funded businesses, and pre-revenue startups redefining what it means to build and run a business today. To surface this new class of entrepreneurial heroes, we decided to flip the script, vetting nominations from every corner of the country with the help of over a dozen A-list judges, including Sheryl Sandberg, Sierra, A-Rod, Reid Hoffman, Melody Hobson, Aisha Curry, and many more, some of whom you will hear from today. Today's all are proven businesses with under 10 million in revenue and funding, but infinite drive and hustle. Today's event is in recognition of thousands of founders that applied to be a part of this groundbreaking initiative. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you for joining us. Now, let's get right to our powerhouse lineup.
Now, for a look at Meta's mission to support Black-owned businesses, please welcome Sierra, Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter, entrepreneur, and philanthropist; Sheryl Sandberg, Chief Operating Officer, Meta; and interviewer Maneet Ahuja, Senior Editor, Forbes.
We've got quite a powerhouse duo with us here this morning. Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Meta, and Sierra, Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. Thank you both for joining us in this special conversation for our inaugural Next 1000 Summit in celebration of the most intrepid founders and business owners from across the country. You both have been big supporters of our Next 1000 franchise since day one, and it's in part because of your steadfast commitment to supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs through countless efforts and initiatives. So Sheryl, we've spoken a lot over my time here about the responsibility companies like Meta have to support small businesses through the pandemic, especially those that are the hardest hit. Part of that responsibility entails sharing real-time data. Meta released its 8th Global State of Small Business report that shed a sobering light on how minority-owned SMBs have been faring. Can you share a few details on the findings?
Absolutely. Let me start, Maneet, by thanking you for your commitment to small business. The work you do and how much you care comes through in everything you do. I want to thank Sierra for sharing a stage with me. I'm actually visiting Seattle today from this chair. I did a small business roundtable, so it's perfect. But also, as I told Sierra in our little pre-talk, my kids, I have 5 of them, think I'm the least cool person in the world. And like, I got to say I was doing this with her and I was like, cool for a day. So I'm super grateful to both of you. But yes, let's talk about small business and our small business report. We've done 8 of them, 8 reports. The first was done in May 2020. So this is a COVID era thing we've been doing because COVID is a health crisis. It's a gender crisis. It's an equality crisis. And it is a crisis for small business. Now, the one we're releasing right now fielded in mid-July. So the Delta variant was just starting to kick up. And here's what we know. Overall, fewer small businesses are closed, 18%, down from 24% February. And that's good, right? 24% to 18% is positive direction, but 18% is still 18%.
That's still a huge number.
It's a huge number. And women and people of color owned SMBs are the hardest hit. 20% of those led by women compared to 16% of men. SMBs led by people of color are in the US are 50% more likely than white-owned SMBs to either be closed, forced to lay off worker, or have lower sales. 40% of people-owned color-led SMBs are anticipating cash flow problems versus 29% of white-led SMBs. And 50% of people of color-led SMBs are confident they can stay open versus 70% of white SMBs. And for ones SMBs led in the Black community, only 43% feel they can stay open. So we are still in a crisis. It is a crisis that hits women and businesses owned by people of color the most, which unfortunately is not surprising.
And because of that, Meta is working on various initiatives, right? And some of those are part of the reason why you both are here today, correct?
Sarah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Sarah, I know we're going to get a little bit into that, but you've launched multiple businesses during the pandemic, most recently Dare to Roam brand, as well as the House of LR&C. Can you share what the experience has been like starting a business during COVID, that personal firsthand experience and your philosophy behind these brands?
Yeah, no, it's been an incredible journey and process. I'm learning just like everyone else, especially, this being the beginning for me, running businesses of this kind. It's been a blessing to have people like Christine Day help us run the House of LR&C for both Russell and I, because she knows what she's doing and she's able to help us find all the cushion we need, considering all the beaten up that all of our businesses are going through during this time. So it's definitely been a lot of learning curves in the process. And then also, as you mentioned, with Dare to Roam, my backpack company, which I'm excited about, it's kind of a crazy time to be launching anything, as we all know. It's super challenging, but what's really important, I think, the thread throughout everything that I've been able to do is impact. Impact has been at the forefront of it all. And so that's what really what's been giving me the drive to, to keep on going, and why I'm excited and passionate about what we're doing, because everything that we do, we give back 3% of our sales. And we give it to our Why Not You Foundation. And, it's helping us to continue on that great mission to impact. And so I'd say that, having that factor and all of it is what really has been giving us the drive. And of course, I think the thing is that while the world is, going through this change, we can't let the world change us. And it's about adjusting. Life still goes on. We still have to provide. Russ and I, we talked about it with the House of LR&C, like, what do we do? Me, him, and Christine sat down. It's like, we have this great vision. Our vision is to have big impact on people, low impact on the planet. Like, we know our goals and we're focused on that. And sustainability is at the core of it. So if there's not a time, there's a time. This is a time now to be conscious of the world, to be conscious of what we're contributing to the world. And it also gives us a creative outlet. I think we have to be creative in this process. I think it's important not to lose sight that, if you're fortunate enough to do what you love doing and it gives you some kind of creative release, you got to do it. Even if you may not be in the season where everything is like, normal and, easy. I think every good thing, every great thing is going to have a challenge of some kind. And we're in like the most challenging time of it all. Right. But staying driven because of the mission to impact through it all. And, we unfortunately, just like a lot of other people, when COVID happened, we started our business before COVID happened. So you can't just completely stop it, but you have to adjust. And so just like everyone else, we're adjusting in the process, and we're staying focused on the mission. And we know, and I really believe we're going to get through this time. I'm a big person on faith. And I'm a believer that if we can just stay the course, be disciplined, you have to be really disciplined in a season like this. I believe that it will all work itself out. And the gains will be great when we come out of it. You see this where, you get through that funky spot, and then the day when it's over, it's like skyrockets, but because you've laid the foundation. So that's my wish. And I think we have to all think that way.
Yeah, that's such a great
I awkwardly got out of my chair, but I don't want to show off and make everyone jealous, but I have one of her backpacks.
Yay!
Check it out.
Where's my backpack, Sierra? I thought we were friends.
Manit, I got you covered, Manit, okay? I got you.
I went online and bought this, but I just wanted to share because it's just an amazing mission and an amazing product. So
thank you so much.
You can have put it out there.
Okay.
What'd you say, Cheryl?
I was saying to everyone, you can have one too.
Yes, exactly. But what's really sweet about that, to that point though, like as I mentioned about the just being conscious, is that in the backpacks there's this antimicrobial technology that
Mhm.
we created, and that's to make you more germ free. It's germ proof. So when our kids go to school and they come back home, and from this crazy time we're living in, less germs carried. So thanks for that, Cheryl. I want everybody to dare to roam, but again, just being mindful of the time we're living in. Like I think when you're creating something during this time, you have to be mindful.
Mhm. So Cheryl, on the topic of being mindful, you've spoken recently about the role larger companies like Meta have in the ongoing recovery. As Sierra was speaking to, we're still in the midst of recovering from this pandemic, and hopefully we're coming out and seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, and the responsibility that larger companies have to small business. What steps has Meta taken towards helping in the recovery? We've spoken about it before, but it seems like every time we talk, there are significant advances. So I'd love our audience to hear a little bit more about some of the more recent efforts that the company has been focused on.
I mean, look, small businesses create the majority of job growth in our economy. And think about that. Small businesses are also the lifeblood of our communities. Now, large businesses, we believe, have a responsibility to help small businesses. And we've seen all along that small businesses, particularly those who are Black owned, Latinx owned, got hit much more rigorously. So we launched a whole bunch of programs. We've launched a COVID grant program. We launched, after the George Floyd tragic death of George Floyd and the racial reckoning, we launched racial justice grants. We also were dedicated to training Black and Latinx SMBs. But right now we're doing our second year of one of my favorite programs, which is called Buy Black Friday. And so a lot of people say they want to support Black small businesses, but how do you know what is a Black owned small business, particularly when it's online? You can't see anyone in person. I think a lot of people know what Black Friday is, that day after Thanksgiving coming up where people start their shopping. Well, 2 of the Meta employees came up with an idea last year to do Buy Black Friday. And they had a hackathon at the company. And the idea was to leverage the power of Facebook, of Instagram, of our platforms, to let people know what those small businesses that were Black owned were. And so we just kicked off the program last week. People can tune in to the live Facebook show. I am publishing my own Buy Black Friday gift guide. And Sierra, I'm proud to announce right now that this backpack is in my Buy Black Friday gift guide. Yay. And I'm also really excited that Sierra has agreed to launch her own Buy Black Friday gift guide. So I've picked a bunch of products that I love for people to buy. I know you're picking a bunch of products that you love for people to buy. And it's just a new way that we can help support Black owned small businesses through this time.
So Sierra, can you tell us a little bit about why this partnership and mission was so critical to you? I know you're working on a million things right now, right? But this partnership really spoke to you. So I would love the audience to hear a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I love what Cheryl and the team are doing, and I think it's brilliant that they thought of this idea. It really is about giving these businesses platforms. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of a recognition that will go a long way for the brand. And so I want to encourage people to not just buy this holiday, but to buy Black. I am all for this mission. And I also created, as Cheryl said, my own Black Friday gift guide. And it's going to be available on Facebook shop November 22nd. And I was able to highlight some really cool brands. There's one brand called Beautiful Curly Me that's created by this really cute mom and daughter duo. They create these really adorable, relatable dolls and hair accessories to inspire confidence in girls of color. And I just love, being able to support the mission of brands like this. And again, being able to, share some of my selections, and you'll be able to find all the kind of gifts that you would need for the holiday. And that was my mission when I was curating the list. And again, just being able to support brands, like being able to support Black owned businesses, especially being a Black owner, owning businesses and building them. I know what support means, right? And understanding what Cheryl's been speaking about, it's important that we give as many brands as possible the opportunity, and they sell as many products as possible. I think that's the mission. Let's get these products off the shelves. Let's support, let's change the narrative. Let's shift these numbers. When Cheryl speaks about these numbers, obviously being a Black woman and a Black business owner, I feel that, and it's like, my
It is the
career
power to shift entire communities, right?
100%. And so it's my dream and, vision that, we're going to look out and look ahead, and it won't be, the disparity will no longer be, it will no longer exist. Like that's the great, that's my vision and my wish and my goal, to be able to use my platform as much as I can to make that difference and to raise the bar, and for all of us to be able to rise together. I think that's what's important. So, what's also cool is that Meta Elevate is also going to nominate 10 Black owned businesses for marketing mentorship. And also each business will receive $10,000 in Meta ad credits and advertising creative support. So that's also critical, right? That advertising support is huge. And so I just thought it was an amazing campaign, and I was truly excited to join Cheryl and team and to promote this, right? And let people know there's opportunity to grow your businesses and to keep your faith. And let's highlight and give these brands an opportunity to keep on growing and get the support they need.
Yeah, and I mean, that's so smart. I mean, speaking to hundreds of small business owners all throughout the pandemic, and the key differentiator between the ones that really were successful and the ones that struggled was the ability to have like marketing tools and digitization. I think it was like a 4,000% difference in revenue, one recent report alluded to. And what I love so much about this partnership also is that it's not about one day, Black Friday, it's about the entire holiday season. So, one day is not going to move the needle, and maybe one season won't, but it's a great movement to start bridging that gap, as you said. And so, Cheryl, much of the data shows the top need for small businesses remains access to cash flow. And we've been talking about this consistently, and part of that comes from, government resources. Meta recently announced an interesting way the company is helping minority businesses with this need. Can you share an update on how the program is going?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this program, even though it sounds like the most administrative thing in the world. I think it really helps. So this was the brainchild of another one of the great Meta employees, a man named Jason. He heads our supplier diversity program. So we're a big company. We buy a lot of stuff. We launched a public commitment to say we're going to buy from diverse suppliers. So he's working on that. And what he noticed about a year ago is that many of our diverse suppliers were really struggling with cash flow. They do work for us and other companies. They have to pay for the goods, pay for the people to do it. And then they put out invoices, and those invoices don't get paid for not giving them the cash flow to regenerate and grow. So he came up with a pilot program where we bought the invoices from diverse suppliers. We gave them the cash. We charge a fee only to cover the cost of the transaction. We make absolutely no money. The supplier gets the money immediately. They can pay their bills, continue to grow. And then we own the invoice and we go out and get paid. Mm-hmm. Now, after he did this with a few diverse suppliers, he pitched the idea to us, and it was so successful that we expanded it to tens of thousands of SMBs, and we funded it with $100 million.
Oh, wow.
Partnering.
I didn't know that it was that large, because I had heard about the program, but I didn't know that it was at such a large scale.
Well, I think the last time you and I spoke, we were in that pilot phase, and it wasn't at such a large scale. And so the pilot worked. Mm-hmm. And so we funded it with $100 million. We're partnering with 6 organizations that support diverse SMBs, owners who are women, people of color, veterans, LGBTQ+, and people with disabilities. And we've only been open for the real business post-pilot for a month. We've already funded $6 million in invoices, from coffee roasters to construction to personal care brands. And again, small businesses need actual help, and that means actual cash. So I'm super proud of Jason for coming up with this and excited to see what's possible.
Yeah, and another thing that really speaks to me is that you're really getting to the nuts and bolts of what the pain points are for SMBs, right? We can't, more help may be coming with the administration or governmental programs, but that's really not in a small business owner's control, right? Or other grants that they may or may not get. But being able to pay their bills on a monthly basis, those are things that really help keep the lights on. And so, I think that that's a great movement in the right direction. So, Sierra, we know the pandemic has been especially hard on Black-owned small businesses, but also on women. This is something Cheryl and I have spoken a lot about with her Lean In reports and various other reports that have come out that really speak to the just disparity that the toll the pandemic has taken on women. Many moms are doing double shift by working full-time and taking care of the kids. Any advice for how you've balanced being a mother, a wife, and a business owner of multiple businesses?
I will say, being a mom and entrepreneur, being a mom alone is a job within itself, and so I salute on my moms out there that do just that. Like, I think people underestimate exactly how much goes into just that job alone. And then when you take pursuing your, business, endeavors and goals, and that's those all the things that I've been fortunate enough to do during this time requires so much work and requires so much attention. And sometimes things do feel a little unbalanced, just to be honest, and
Right.
if you know that and, kind of have that outlook, then it allows you to power through because it's worth it. And I think what's important for me as a mom is that when my kids look at me and they see the grind, they know that my mom grinded for that. My mom went after what she believed in and she made it happen. And then hopefully that energy pours into them and they have that same attitude and same drive and desire because, in life, I think anything you want to do, big or small, in my case, I have a lot of businesses, but even if you don't have a lot of businesses, you're going to still have to work hard for it. And so I think that's just the reality of life, right? So I think it's important to keep that in perspective and, stay focused on your mission. Like for me, I honestly feel more accomplished when I'm powering through all the things that I want to do. Something about that is satisfying for me. Something about me getting up every day and fighting hard and pumping hard through it all. We're really blessed that we are having success in a lot of our businesses and the House of LRNC and Dare to Roam and our fragrance and all these things. But I'll tell you, there's a lot on the back end that's not so beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I embrace those challenges, and we say in our house, sometimes we say we welcome adversity, meaning when it gets tough, it's like, we're going to run towards it. Like, bring it on, let's go. And I think you have to have that mentality, and especially being a mom, it's a balancing act. Like, I also want to be balanced in my love life with my husband. Like, I want to make sure I'm keeping it sexy there too. So, it's a balancing act across the board. It's organized chaos. But I think the greatest thing I would encourage everyone to do when you're, especially you're a woman, like making sure you're doing what you love. They say, when you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And I will say that gives me the drive that I need to wake up every day with a smile on my face, even when it's tough. I find my smile at some point in time throughout the day because I'm doing what I love. And I have to sometimes pause and just take a deep breath and be like, even in the midst of the funkiness, like, it's all good, right? Because I am doing what I love. And this is a part of it. Like, sometimes you forget that in the beautiful journey of it all, it's sometimes a little ugly in the process. Like, it's sometimes a little imperfect. Sometimes you want to go a little crazy. Like, you want to be like, ah, and that's okay. Like, that's a part of it. So I think if we keep that in perspective, we'll, us mamas and us women, and that have goals, like, we'll keep pumping and we'll keep on like getting better and, and we'll keep achieving our goals, right? Just putting one foot forward each day is an accomplishment within itself, so, that's what I would have to say to that.
Yeah, no, that's incredible advice. And I'm just listening to it and I'm thinking about everything on my to-do list as a mom, as a journalist, as the stories I'm working on, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, okay, if Sierra says to just keep on the path, I can do it. So I know we're almost out of time, but Cheryl, I know this audience is very interested to learn a little bit more about Facebook is now Meta. Can you give us a little insight on what the metaverse is and why you're pivoting the company towards it?
Yeah, it is a big change. I've been introducing myself as the, COO of Meta just for about a week. But I think it's exciting. What we believe the metaverse will be is the next computing platform, which is the successor to the mobile internet. Now, it's really hard to imagine that, but I'm 52 years old. And I remember the first time I made a mobile phone call. It was like a phone without a cord. And I was like, oh my God, how does this work? Sierra, that must make me seem, and Manit, just so crazy old to you. But
no, I remember it too. I was like in middle school or
I experienced a phone with the cord.
I was well out of middle school when that happened. But I couldn't really picture that. And we believe the metaverse there's going to be a set of virtual spaces where you create, you explore, you connect. And just like we couldn't have imagined this Zoom call when I was growing up, that I could see you if we're not in the same place, well, without being, recorded on film, but live, I think there's a whole thing out there where people are going to be friends and work and play and learn and shop and create. And it's going to be immersive and more meaningful. Now, we don't think the metaverse will be a single product that one company can build alone, but it's something that will come together with so many companies, orgs, and partners. And so we changed our name to Meta to reflect where we're going, because our mission has always been about building community and bringing people together. And now our focus is going to be still building Facebook, still building Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, all the products people use to share and connect today, but also the platforms that we will use to share and connect in a more immersive way in the future. I can't wait. One day, this conversation with the three of us, we would feel like we are together. I can see you, Sierra. I can see you, Monique, but I don't feel like I'm in the same room as you. But one day we will. And
well, I got an Oculus headset for Christmas last year, and me and my husband, it was a perfect COVID gift, right? Because in the midst of that, my brother-in-law climbed Everest, and so we got to experience that in Oculus, and it is mind-blowing. So that's my little taste of it. But as a last follow-up, because I know we're out of time, for this audience, what does it mean for small businesses that have limited resources? How can the metaverse help them?
Well, I think right now the metaverse is a future opportunity, but it's an important one, right? A lot of the tools we think are still 5 to 10 years out. Some of the things you do that are kind of 2D today will be grown to apply to the metaverse. So what do you want to do if you're a small business? You got to get yourself online. You got to get the basic functionality where you have a Facebook presence, an Instagram shop, and then you'll be able to turn that into a virtual space in the future. What really we care about in all of this is democratizing access. Think about starting a business before the web. You had to get a loan. You had to get an actual store. That was expensive and discriminated against the same people who were historically discriminated against: women, people of color, women of color who face both gender and race challenges and barriers. All of that was harder. Starting an online company, still harder, but easier than it was. And we believe the future, if we build the tools correctly, will be even easier.
Cheryl, Sierra, thank you both so much for joining us for our inaugural Next 1000 Summit. Your support since day one, both of you as judges, has been so critical to our mission, helping highlight 1,000 entrepreneurs from across the country. We are so grateful.
Aw, so sweet. Thank you for having us.
I'm so grateful to you.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
Now for our first conversation, the next frontier, scaling your startup in the new economy. Please welcome panelists Nicole Gibbons, founder and CEO, Claire; Deepika Mutiala, founder and CEO, Live Tinted; Maria Palacio, co-founder and CEO, Progeny Coffee; and moderator Alexandra Sternlicht, Under 30 editorial community lead and reporter, Forbes.
Everyone, so glad to be here with these three amazing female founders. It's no easy job to follow Sierra and Sheryl Sandberg, but I think you're in for a real treat today. And I will be taking audience questions, so please put those into the chat and hopefully we can get to all of them. So the women I'm joined by today are amazing. Nicole has raised multiple millions of dollars. And Maria, her coffee is in places like Target, and Deepika has almost 400,000 followers on Instagram. Tell me a little bit about how you guys got to the scale that you're at today. What's been the most important part of it?
Alexandra, thank you so much for this. And it has been such a pleasure, to share this stage with such an incredible entrepreneurs like Deepika and Nicole, who have incredible trajectories. To your question, I think it has been being very focused, mission-driven, and resilience has been one of the key things. One thing that I've noticed that the moment you have vision and mission, and you carry that and you believe in what you're doing, it allows you to break through those barriers and really knock those doors that you never even thought you could knock down. And so, and one thing that, COVID had taught us is that resilience, to like keep on pushing. So I feel like that's been one of the things. And another thing that I learned that was very important is that how do you create the right culture and the right team that's going to lead this mission? Because definitely this is not a one person's job, or, it's not just me knocking the door, but I'm sure behind Nicole and behind the Vika, there's such an incredible team that are believing in the mission and they're standing in their mission that allows them to wake up every morning and just push their mission forward.
I couldn't agree more. I think you have to be super mission driven. My personal career trajectory has been a long, winding road to get to where I am today as the founder and CEO of Claire, but I've always had the same mission, right? When I was working as an interior designer, it was helping people create beautiful homes, and we're continuing that mission through the work with Claire. And I think that resilience and that grit, especially over the past couple of years of this pandemic, never more has that attribute been a top skill to have as a founder in order to thrive.
Yeah, I retweet both of them. It's all about focusing on your why and why you got started, because yeah, we all learned the last year, it's not easy. It's going to have its ups and downs, but if you remind yourself like why you got started, why you're doing this in the first place, outside of the revenue aspect and the purpose focus of it all, it keeps you going.
Mm-hmm. And that touches on something that I think has been important for everyone, and all the founders in the audience can relate to, is this idea of reinvention. Maria, I know that when you got started, you were originally, serving your coffee in offices like Facebook and Google. Now obviously when the pandemic happened, you weren't able to do that anymore. Can you talk a little bit about that pivot and how you managed to navigate that?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was a wild time. So a little bit of background for those founders out there that are listening to us. So when we first started, they advised us, do one thing and do it well, like go just for one sales channel. So we wanted like B2B e-commerce, and they're like, no, do one thing. So we went after B2B. So Progeny Coffee is a mission-driven company to lift farmers out of poverty through our sustainable coffee chain and circular economy. In order to do that, we need to scale. So we don't do cherries. It's all embedded. And so we needed to move large volumes. And so we decided to go after B2Bs, and being in Silicon Valley, we're serving like Google, Facebook, Intuit, and so many more, where they got to adopt our farmers. And we, like by 2019, we were growing. We were holding large contract values. It looked really good. Like it's like those moments that you feel like I got it, and like we're getting there, like we figured it out. And so then, the pandemic hit, and we lost 97% of our revenue because all of our clients closed in a day. And that was our only revenue. We didn't have really like an e-commerce, or we didn't have a marketing team or anything like that. And so it was this journey where our team, and it ties back to what we were saying about vision and mission, our team was so committed to the mission and the farmers that everybody needed to shift the role. So like suddenly like our biz dev manager needed to do runs and production. Everybody shifted from like to be now then social media managers, marketing, and we didn't even have a marketing team, all the way to launching a subscription, and then start also knocking doors into retailers. I do need to say there was a moment that we cried, like I cried if we're very honest, but there was a moment of like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and let's push forward, because we cannot let our farmers just unattended. And so it was a beautiful moment that taught us resilience, that a well mission-driven team really goes through. And so highlight to all my team that is listening. So yeah, it was quite a journey, I will need to say, but thankful that now we are on the other side.
That's pretty amazing. I'm wondering, Nicole and Deepika, hopefully the pandemic is really a once in a lifetime type thing, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your reinventions and what you had to go through in that difficult time that all founders face during their career trajectories.
Yeah, I think for us, our business, we were lucky beneficiaries of the COVID boom with a lot of people being stuck at home. Lots of people wanted to paint their spaces. So we actually grew about 550%.
Wow.
Which was,
That's amazing.
But as a really small team, it was incredibly taxing on our own bandwidth and being able to like keep up with the demand and pivot some of our processes to be able to handle that larger volume of customers. And, and as we went into the pandemic, we have a lot of consultants and freelancers that support us, but we were a 4-person team. So
wow,
it required a lot of our bandwidth to thrive in 2020 for sure. And I think as a young company, don't underestimate the importance of establishing processes that can scale because, as you grow, that's going to become more important. So we've been very process focused at Claire. And then even though 2020 was really smooth, this year has been really challenging for us. A lot of supply chain challenges and operational challenges, 3.5 years in business, natural team attrition and kind of dealing through all of that change and has required also, a lot of pivoting. And so I think kind of going back to that first point of like being really resilient and having a lot of grit, it's full of ups and downs. So, definitely make sure that when you're in this journey for anyone out there who's starting a business and is really young in your trajectory, it's really important that you kind of maintain that sort of positivity throughout the journey, because you'll need that in order to make it through those low points for sure.
Wow. Yeah. We did not have 500% growth. That's amazing. By the way.
Yeah, seriously.
I was really just trying to focus on like surviving, not thriving, honestly. Like it was really hard, right? When you're an ambitious person, and the leader of the company, you feel a heavy weight and responsibility. There's not just customers, but there's employees and people who are counting on you. And I think on the positive side, though, what it forced us to do as a company was, it gave me back time to like step back and look at the business and say, these are the things that we need to focus on rather than just going and launching new products. Let's think about how we can be as efficient as possible and profitable as possible. And I wasn't taking the time to do that. It was too much to, you're just going when you're building a company. And I think the other really great win was, it made me realize that the talent pool can be much bigger than we had expected for hiring. Instead of thinking everyone had to be in LA where our office was, we actually got rid of our office because we were trying to cut costs. And I hired a senior employee that lives in New York. And so I think I was really trying to focus on the positivity of all of this and recognize that, first of all, the whole world is going through this. And I know that, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but this kind of herd mentality of like, we're all going through it together and let's just survive during this time. And I am proud to say we did grow, and to me that is the focus on, I'm in this for the long game. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. I know that's a line people say all the time, but it's very real. Like I want Live Tinted to be a legacy brand that outlives myself. So I'm not in this for some quick win. And that means there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but that's part of the journey.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really interesting point, Deepika, about hiring. For a lot of young companies, you need people doing everything, and that's just not the reality. How do you know where to prioritize your hiring? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I will say it is really nice at this stage now to step back and actually be able to hire specialists rather than generalists. But yes, in the beginning, it was all about hiring people who were agile and comfortable wearing so many hats at once. And so down from like junior people who are right out of college, but also to like the senior level. If you are on our marketing team, there is no know your e-com versus integrated marketing communications versus PR or any of those things. You're on the marketing team, but you're probably also business development strategy, and you're kind of supply chain because you're probably going to be boxing some things up. And I think that is the most important thing to consider when you're a young business just starting out, is focus on the person and ask questions about like their general overarching passion for the company. I feel so fired up by the employees we have right now because I can feel their passion for what we're doing day in and day out. And I think that goes back to what I think all of us are saying is being a purpose-driven brand that has a mission beyond just a physical product, because people come in every single day knowing that they're doing something that's bigger than themselves. And I think that helps you get through pandemics. Just the ups and downs of everything building a company is, at least for me, and listen, I'm still young in this whole thing. Maybe it'll get to a point where I really just need the data-driven person, but no matter what, I always want people who you feel that they just like drip in passion for the business.
Yeah, I really like what you just said, Deepika. And it's really true, as well, we are a coffee company, and we have had big fails and big wins on our hiring, but definitely when you're a small company, how do you find those teammates that are okay to, in our case today, doing deliveries, boxing, business development, going up to a client, but knowing that they are mission driven, like knowing that even if they're boxing coffee, they're lifting a farmer out of poverty and they're just passionate about the mission. But it has been really beautiful then now to transition right now where we were just hiring based on our current needs, and everyone just needed to wear like so many hats, to now being able to step back and be like, okay, this is our strategy. And it's something that I think that Pika also mentioned, that COVID allowed us was to step back and be like, okay, we're going to need to reinvent our whole company right now, because like our sales strategy just went like through the garbage, and like how do we reinvent ourselves? So it allowed us to kind of have that step back and be like, okay, who do we really need, and how do we create space for those people that are not very obvious, like those that came out from an Ivy League, those who are far away, like, we also need now start hiring someone that it's not in our city, but in other cities, right? Because we are a little bit remote right now. So I feel like this pandemic moment gave us space to kind of broaden and rethink our hiring. And so right now we have incredible people that we know they needed a chance. And once you give them the chance and they're fueled with mission and passion, they just go that extra mile.
Yeah, I second everything. I mean, hiring has been one of my personal biggest challenges as a founder. And I'd say one other kind of great bit of advice is, don't underestimate the importance of hiring for attitude. There's so many people that have the hard skills who have the subject matter expertise, but in an early stage startup, when there's a lot of ambiguity, there maybe isn't a process or a roadmap for everything. You need the kind of people who can build and who can establish those processes and who can, operate and kind of build something from nothing. And, it took a while for me to hone in on who are the types of people that embody the values that demonstrate they can do that. But that's a really, really important thing. And the earlier you can bring that onto your team, I think the less hiring mistakes you'll make.
Definitely. And there's a great question from the audience that's just come in about the practicality of it all. How do you find the right people?
It's really challenging. I mean, right now I'm kind of going through a whole wave of reinventing my team and bringing on a whole new group of people. We're at a kind of a new inflection point of growth where the business's needs today are very different than what they are 3 years ago. So for some of the more senior roles, it's a mix of posting jobs on all the platforms like LinkedIn. And, we use an applicant tracking system that kind of automatically sort of pushes the jobs out to all the relevant platforms, but then also working with a recruiter to help increase my personal bandwidth. I think recruiters can be very expensive, but for senior level hires that are going to have a big impact on your company, I think it's well worth the expense. And I think it's really about casting a wide net, because right now, I don't know how the other founders in the room are feeling, but it is a really challenging time to be hiring. It's a lot of competition. There's a lot of movement. People are leaving their roles. It feels like people are commanding a lot higher salaries these days. And so it's just a really competitive market for talent. So I'd say the more you can kind of brand your your company and your employer brand, the wider net you can cast, to build as wide of a talent pool as possible will help you. And then you're going to have to talk to a lot of people. I mean, for some of the roles that I've hired for, I spoke to maybe 30 people before I honed in on candidates that I felt were, kind of worth moving on to closer towards that offer phase. So, a lot of times you'll hear people say one of your biggest roles as a founder is hiring, right? So that you can find the right people to help you carry that vision forward.
Yes. One thing that I noticed is that when you build your brand and you're building the brand for an audience and you're so focused about the audience, that it appeals to the audience and everything. But I think sometimes we forget how to build a brand that also appeals to hiring, because you need to bring in the right talent and you need to make sure that people are getting to know your brand, but as well as like who you are as a company, what are your values internally and the culture you're creating, and therefore the words start spreading out. So in our case, we have been lucky where people will reach out to us because there is already that, voice, that this is what we stand for, not only outwardly, but also inwardly. Because, we believe that if the whole company internally is mission driven, then it's going to trickle out. But in a more practical way, I think we have, use LinkedIn, use Sprout and all of these, platforms to put out there. But if you don't put it along with how you're positioning your brand internally, I think it will be really hard for you to attract that right talent. And then also analyzing like what are the benefits. And sometimes when you're a small company, you just cannot sometimes when you're starting providing 401k or benefits or healthy or whatever, like stock options and all of those fancy things, but like being creative on what you're offering, like paid vacations or flexible timing or remote working that could appeal to other, and you're competing against these like massive companies that are able to pay the high salaries, the full packages. So just thinking like, what are you offering to them that it's so appealing that they'll prefer coming to your company?
I think it's a really great question, because it's, I think as a founder, the most difficult part of the entire job, because you are constantly recruiting. One of my investors said that to me, that is the role, literally like what Nicole said, it's like very real. So when I started, it was first off of my social media, and I recognize that I do have like a following, so that does help. But outside of that, LinkedIn, by the way, I hadn't used LinkedIn in years because I wasn't searching for a job. And then I realized, whoa, this is a great tool to be able to actually, I always feel silly posting the accolades of the company. There is this pride that comes from it, but at the same time, you're so busy going, you forget to like actually celebrate them. And now actually through trying to recruit talent, it's forced me to take a step back and actually celebrate those wins and share them, because that does help bring in the talent. And I realized that. So I think any type of press wins that you get, make sure to share that on social media and use that as a tool to be able to hopefully attract other people. You never know who's going to screenshot that and share it with other people as well. And I think once you're at the stage of a business where you are taking on funding, it's been a huge sort of way that I have vetted potential investors, is asking them how they can help us find talent, because I think that is something that is such a huge time suck for internal employees. So trying to get people who do have a database of really strong talent and will help us find those senior leaders, because recruiters are, like Nicole said, very expensive, but the investors are giving you their money, right? So it's like, how can they save that money to go towards marketing or other parts of the business by helping you find those senior people? And so I think, honestly, I'm trying to take it back a step for people who are just starting their business and looking for employees. And I would just say, really focus in on the generalists who will do everything and anything. And then as you get closer to that stage where you're fundraising, really vet your potential investors and how they can help you with that.
Yeah, one other thing to add to that, when we were first starting, like pre-launch, I hired some of my best talents from cold outreach on LinkedIn. So, to Deepika's point of what a powerful tool LinkedIn is. Scouring profiles of people who seem to have the background that's well suited for the role that you're hiring for, and just reach out. And that was like a key source. When we were in our pre-launch days, we didn't have cash for recruiters, and we were really scrappy. And cold outreach on LinkedIn is a fantastic a resource.
And I think just mentally accept that this is going to take a big chunk of your time, and that's just a part of the journey. Because I think for me, I found it to be so frustrating until I realized that is part of the duty of this role, and no one, and you have to do it, period.
Yeah, so I mean, hiring is amazing and being able to hire is great, but in order to do that, you actually need money. So another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is your funding journeys. And I'd love to start with Nicole on this one. You've raised $4.2 million for Claire, which is one of the highest funding rounds for a Black female founder, which is absolutely terrible, but also amazing. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your funding journey. Why did you decide to pursue venture capital cash, and walk us through kind of the milestones of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll first start by saying venture capital funding is not for every business. I think for me personally, my business is really capital intensive. It's not the kind of product you can make in your house. Paint is regulated. There's so many complexities to the fulfillment. So I knew that I needed outside capital because I don't come from a background where I have a high net worth network of friends and family, which is another route a lot of people go. So I went straight to venture. And honestly, when I started my journey and started raising capital, I didn't know much about venture capital or how to go about raising funding. So I started with a really simplistic approach. It was like, who's investing in businesses that are similar to mine? And that's kind of where I started. I used a tool called Crunchbase to do a lot of research. I also used LinkedIn, especially when it came to identifying the right investors. I'd go to their profile and figure out if I knew anyone that was connected to them. It is a lot of putting yourself out there, because when you don't have a company to show, and because we raise pre-product, it's even harder. If you have a website or you have some traction or a little bit of press, it's easier to get investors to take your call or take the meeting. But when you have literally nothing but a deck, it's a lot harder. So I really had to put myself out there quite a bit. Tons of networking, went to 1 million panels just like this pre-COVID though, and talked to people and all of that. And I would say what helped me be successful in our early capital raises was, one, especially in the pre-launch kind of pre-seed raise, was having a very clear vision, a very clear financial model, and having some kind of proof points along the way. So at the time when we were pre-launch, I had already had kind of soft contracts with all of our key suppliers. The website was in the works. There was some level of I was already building. It wasn't like I need money to help me bring this idea to life. We were kind of already on our way. So I think that has helped. And then I'd say when you are a minority, because that's, I'm, I guess, double minority, don't listen to the data points, because if I listened to the data points, I probably would have been too discouraged to even try to raise capital. I think you have to remain steadfast in your vision. You have to be really confident in what you're building and the problem that you're solving, and be able to tell that story confidently to investors. And I think that storytelling aspect is also a really important part of raising capital, no matter what stage you're at, whether you're raising your pre-seed or your Series C. You have to be able to sell that vision and earn enough conviction from investors to support you. And I would say it's not easy. It hasn't been easy. I think the further you grow, unless you're just like an immediate rocket ship unicorn in 12 months, but the further you go, the more you have to prove, and the fundraising journey becomes harder and harder. It was incredibly difficult during the pandemic. I'm just in the process of kind of raising capital now, and it's really challenging. So, and it's demoralizing. So again, that's where that grit and that resilience really comes into play, because you'll need it to get through that fundraising process, because it can be a soul crushing experience to get as many no's as it generally takes to get to those few yeses.
Yeah, a few things there. I think the same way we said recruiting is a full-time job as a founder, so is fundraising. And it's like, I just closed my seed. I'm already doing talks for my Series A. And it's just like, I've accepted that this is part of it, but taking it a step back for somebody who potentially is not at the place where they can get the funding, because I totally get that too, because like Nicole said, there is more no's than there are yeses. And yes, it is a very mentally draining process and makes you doubt yourself a lot. So you have to constantly remind yourself your why, taking it back to that. But something that I did in the early days that I think is an interesting model. I'm not saying to not be protective of your equity, because I do think that that's very important, and you know your vision of where the brand's going to be in 10 years. So you do want to make sure you protect that. But I think it's a really interesting thing to be able to use equity as a way to get people who potentially don't need the capital right now, but are interested in the model that you're building. And maybe you could give them a percentage of, X amount of shares that vest over time, and they might be more interested in, if you don't have that initial capital. I did do that with a few different people, and I think I don't regret it at all, honestly, now that I understand how all of this works. If you don't have the capital, you don't have the capital, right? But you want to attract that talent, so you have to use what you can. So that's one thing. And then for my initial pre-seed round, I went to, instead of going the VC path, I focused in on angel checks from a ton of people in my network that were interested in putting small checks, and then those small checks added up to the amount that I needed for my pre-seed. Now, I know it's not easy to get people who have that capital, even in an angel situation, but I think to do that, always remember that you're constantly networking. And like Nicole mentioned, every single time you're going to these events or panels and networking opportunities, form those genuine relationships, because over time those could end up being your future angel investors.
Yeah, I really like one thing that for us as we were raising was very true. And our advisor told us, first do a list, and once you get to 50 no's, then you're closer to a yes. And I feel like starting with that mindset kind of like set us for success, because I was like, okay, one no, I'm getting closer to my yes. So every no took me closer to a yes. But another thing that for us, or I didn't know, is that there's a whole strategy and being ready for it. Like, I feel like so many people's like, oh, we need money. But once you sit down, it's like, okay, what is your strategy? Do you know what you're going to use it for? Did you do the due diligence yourself? Have you analyzed what this investor, and understanding that investors has timing. So, they have timings where they're deploying money. They have timings also where they are raising their own money, and they have their own investment thesis. So kind of like aligning all of that. So sometimes when you get a no, it's not because of you, it's because you're not aligning with their timing or their thesis or something else. But one thing that I came from Colombia. I was born and raised in a farm, so definitely I don't have like contacts here or anything like that, but just finding the right advisors. I feel like we reach out to key people in the industry that they were already at that stage, that were able to guide us and sit with us to build that deck, build that strategy, and help us kind of like have that language, because it is a language that you need to learn how to navigate and speak.
Thank you guys for sharing your experience. We're almost out of time. And in closing, I wanted to bring it back to another really great audience question. Someone's asked, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I mean, I guess I would say it's a tricky question for me, because I felt at 16 years old that I was going to do exactly what I'm doing right now. So I think the only advice I would give my younger self is cut out the noise and keep going, because you were right. And I think for anyone out there that has this vision, like, stick to it and don't feel as though all those no's you hear, don't let them distract you, because you're right and you know what you're doing.
I think for me, where I was growing up, it was a really challenging space. Farmers produce about 15% below margin, and it just felt like there was no opportunities there. And I feel like I wish, like back then, I was owning and being proud of my roots, and I was owning my inheritance, which it was coffee, which so many times Hispanic or minority, we try to, detach completely from what we come from and reinvent ourselves to be out there and be successful, where we already come from such a rich place.
I think for me, it would be really simple, like you got this and just keep going, kind of like Deepika said, if you have a vision, just you know what you need to be doing and remain steadfast in that and just keep going, because often the difference between success and failure is not how smart you are, it's really how resilient you are and how much perseverance you have to keep going even when things are really, really hard.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your insights and your amazing journeys with our panel today. It has been such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For our next discussion, the next CEO, Leadership Lessons from the Top. Please welcome panelists Maëlle Gavay, CEO, Techstars. Mina Harris, founder and CEO, Phenomenal. Asahi Pompey, Global Head of Corporate Engagement and President, Goldman Sachs Foundation, Goldman Sachs. And moderator Ali Jackson Jolly, Assistant Managing Editor, Diversity and Inclusion, Forbes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the panelists for being with me here today and for the audiences who are part of this important conversation. So I'm going to jump in because I know that these sessions go really fast. But just to frame our conversation a little bit, I will say the obvious, which is that it's been quite a couple of years that we've been through together. And I think this has been 18 months that has really tested the mettle and the resiliency of leaders in the business world. It's also really shone a light on the inequities in business. And as I think a highlight also helped us see which business leaders are really taking this moment to rethink and reimagine ways to create more equity in the workplace. So with that, I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to start with Asahi, because one thing that I have heard you say a few times over the past year or so is that this is the season of pivot. And when you say that, it sort of makes me think about all that we've been through. So I just was hoping that you would sort of share with us, like, what do you mean? Like when you say that what we've, as human beings, as members of society, and as business leaders, this is the season of pivot. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's really been the season of pivot on a number of different dimensions, right? If we think about the beginning of the pandemic, in terms of small businesses needing to morph their business, really figuring out what to do with their employees, how to deal with the pandemic. Then we had obviously the racial equity movement, which we're still going through. And so really it's been the season of pivot on a number of scores. I think we've had to pivot maybe 3 or 4 times over the last couple of years. And to your point on leadership, I think we all know that the real test of leadership comes ultimately in this season of pivot, in times of crisis. And I think a number of things are happening during those times of crisis from a leadership perspective. One is people are looking to their leaders. They're looking to signals, what they say, what they do, their body language, big and small, as to how to manage in that moment of crisis. And the second part is people want to be led, right? They want to be led during those moments of crisis and seasons of pivot with vision, with conviction, with courage during those times. And that ultimately means, as leaders that are tuned in today, all eyes are on you. Now, that may sound scary, but it's absolutely true. All eyes are on you. And Ali, the question I like to ask myself, and I challenge everyone today to ask yourselves, would you want to be led by you during that season of pivot, during that moment of crisis, right? Because your answer to that is going to unpack a lot about leadership in moments of crisis and the kind of leader that you ultimately are. The second thing I'd say is these moments of crisis and seasons of pivot is all about finding opportunity, right? Finding the opportunities to chart the course of where your business needs to go for your team. Because on the one hand, while it's about steadying the ship, ultimately, you've got to catch the fish. You've got to find the opportunity for your business.
Yeah, and I love that you say, thank you for saying that you have to steady the ship, but also, you know, to your point, there are these opportunities for pivotal decision making, decisions that can change and steer the ship in a different course. So I'm going to ask you, is there a moment that you could share with us where you realized as a leader with all those eyes on you that you were going to have to change course, make a pivotal decision to do something different? Would you just like to, and you know, knowing it was gonna make waves, knowing that you had to take the leadership to do it, was there an anecdote that you could share with us about that?
Yeah, I'll tell you a really big one, actually. In fact, I've worked for Goldman Sachs now for 16 years. This is my 16th year. And Goldman Sachs, as we all know, 150-year-old institution, storied legacy financial institution. I was at Goldman during the financial crisis in 2008. And ultimately, overnight, Goldman became a bank holding company. Now, we could have sat back and said, okay, we're a bank holding company. We hadn't anticipated that would happen at that rapidity of change, a week or two ago, that our whole structure would be changing. And so to look around and say, well, what do we do now? Ultimately, what we decided to do is lean into the fact that we're a bank holding company, which meant it allowed us to launch new business lines. So now you look at Goldman Sachs and there's Goldman Sachs Apple Card, right? We launched a consumer business after coming out of changing our corporate structure, which came out of a crisis. And now you have a different Goldman Sachs that now has, a large and even growing consumer platform. I have an Apple credit card. I know many of you do. That's a partnership between Goldman Sachs and Apple. I'm a Marcus by Goldman Sachs customer. I know very many of you are. But all of those decisions came on the back of change, crisis, and really finding the opportunity in those moments, catching the fish ultimately.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm gonna look to you, Mayal, and put you a little bit on the spot, because your industry, the tech industry, is just notoriously non-diverse. And yet there's something that I've heard you say, which is that, I'm gonna make sure I get it right. Amazing entrepreneurs can be found anywhere, in every shape, gender, age, and religion. And so can you, I love that. I love the aspirational thought behind it. But, nothing, to me, things are most important if there's also like a practical way to think about that. So could you sort of explain how you could put that into practice?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first, I agree with your statement, which is I've been working in tech for 15 years. Before joining Techstars, and I can attest that indeed the tech industry is very non-diverse. The reality, though, is that if you look around the world, there are many entrepreneurs absolutely everywhere. They just traditionally they've not been backed by VC, primarily due to what I would call historical pattern matches or stigmas around targeting certain companies' profile in the investment community. And it's a little bit similar to saying that San Francisco or Silicon Valley is the only place to scale a startup. Why? You can absolutely do it in many other places. And so part of the reason actually why I joined Techstars is because Techstars had not just the aspiration of bringing more underrepresented founders to the table, they had actually proven that they could do that. Techstars has invested as of today in close to 2,800 companies. This year alone, we're going to invest in 450, and we have been consistently going and helping entrepreneurs outside of Silicon Valley. We're actually not in Silicon Valley. We operate 45 programs all around the world in the US, but also outside of the US. And we help entrepreneurs who, generally speaking, don't necessarily have access to a network, don't necessarily have access to capital, don't necessarily have the right friends, as the industry calls it, the right friends and the right family that doesn't provide the capital or the advice at the dinner table. And so it's absolutely possible. And I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of the most recent one. And I talk to a lot of founders all day long. That's quite literally my job. We had a young Black entrepreneur. Her name is Maisha Burt. She is a graduate from the Comcast Accelerator of 2020. She built a company called WorkTrue. She helps people find and book flexible workspace in amazingly beautiful hotels and restaurants across the US. And she has been partnering with the hospitality industry to use their underutilized space and make them a network of workspace. And she has done that despite the fact that by her profile, she's been very successful, despite the fact that, again, by her profile, she wouldn't be a traditionally VC backable entrepreneur. And that's just one example, but I can give you many, many more. I think fundamentally what this industry needs to realize, the tech industry, and in particular the tech investment industry needs to realize, is that there are founders absolutely everywhere. The key challenge is opening the door to them, providing them the mentor network like we do at Techstars, but I'm sure there's not just Techstars who can do that. Provide them with capital, more than just advice. I think there are plenty of advice out there, but you need the connection and you need the money to be a successful entrepreneur. And I'm very, very proud of Techstars for that.
And let me ask you that, because you touched on a couple of things that I think about. So in many ways, I think all of us here are trying to do the same thing, which is to think about how to open up, to cast our net wider, right? For me, I think about that in the newsroom. And my industry, which I describe as the business journalism industry. And one maybe highlight that has come out of all of this change and the COVID pandemic is that it's actually easier for me to cast that wider net because of the new shape of the world that we're talking today virtually and that sort of thing. Can you explain, speaking about how there are some previously people in tech who were overlooked by the VC world that couldn't be found. Do you see this as an opportunity also, the way that businesses, are interacting differently? Do you think that there are some new opportunities?
There are definitely some new opportunities. So again, I'm going to try to give you two very concrete examples. When the pandemic hit, Techstars used to run accelerator programs, so bootcamp program for 3 months in person. That was part of the secret sauce. You would come and stay with us for 3 months, hand in hand with your managing director, building your business, recruiting your team. The pandemic hit, we had to go digital and remote. And you know what happened? And we hadn't really fully realized that until it actually happened and was like, oh my God, this is amazing. What happened is that the profile of founders who applied to our program changed. We started seeing more founders from underprivileged socioeconomic background. We started seeing more founders from racially diverse background. We started seeing older people. We started seeing more mothers. And the reason was that for a lot of them, they just could not take 3 months off and not be with their family. They could not relocate to a new place. They didn't have the opportunity to just drop their job and just focus on that. And so to me, the pandemic to a large extent forced us to evolve the model. And that's an amazing thing. And that allowed us to bring even more underrepresented founders. And then the second example is we do help a lot of companies after the bootcamp I'm mentioning, because they got money from us, but they need more to continue to grow. And so we spend a lot of time pitching them to venture capital around the world and say, look at this amazing company. They are going to be the XXX of tomorrow. Yeah. The issue is historically before the pandemic, you would have to go in person. And so either the venture capitalist would come to what we call demo day when our graduates present their companies, or the graduates would have to go and pitch the VC. And that, by definition, just by the law of physics, limited the number of connections that were possible. And underrepresented founders suffered from that more than others because they didn't fit the box. Right. And so the VC were not that attractive. The pandemic changed that. Now it's a Zoom call. And so it's amazing.
It is, yeah. And Mina, welcome. Nice to see you here. I wanted to, so I look at you and I love the narrative that you have started even before, long before the pandemic even. This idea that, you're to me, the aspiration of a young leader should be thinking about greater diversity. Most recently, you penned a brand new children's book called Ambitious Girl. And I was hoping you could just speak a little bit to your inspiration and why you thought that that book was needed right now.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for calling me a young leader. I will take that compliment. So yes, I am the author of Ambitious Girl, and really a lot of things influenced me and inspired me to write the book. But first and foremost, it was really a recognition and an observation that there is a woeful lack of diversity in children's literature. A recent study found that there are more kids' books that have animals as main characters than Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Asian human characters combined. I'm going to say that again. There were more kids' books that had animals than people of color as main characters. And, on the topic of entrepreneurship and just problem solving and deciding that I'm just going to do it myself, I really wrote that book out of frustration, right? I wanted as a new parent, I was really struggling with, my allowing my girls to see themselves on the pages of books, and I wasn't seeing that. And so I wrote the damn book myself. And that was my first book, and Ambitious Girl is my second book. The real influence for Ambitious Girl in particular was really thinking about the power of language. And once again, as a parent of two girls, of two Black children, I know the reality well that they will enter a world and a workforce that tells them, you can be ambitious, but not too ambitious, right? And I really wanted to talk to them early on and make sure that, in our home, we were starting a conversation about the reality of the world, that there are these words and they are very powerful and they are used as weapons to cut down women and girls, to dim their light. But most importantly, to give them the tools and the confidence to reclaim and redefine those words and who they are on their own terms. Something my grandmother used to say, she's very special to me. She was a second mother to me. And she always would say, don't let anyone tell you who you are. You tell them who you are, right? Only you have that power to define who you are and what impact you're going to have on the world and what your ambitions are and what they're going to be. And so that's the opening line of the book. Honestly, I wrote it just as much for my daughters and for kids as I did myself. I still exist as a woman navigating the world in which I am told, simply because I'm living and breathing and have opinions, that I'm to this or to that, right? And it's amazing to see the power of something so simple, right? Let's just talk about the power of language that is wielded in society, in our homes, and certainly in our workplaces. And so that's really what the inspiration was behind the book.
Well, I just personally, I'm going to stop and say thank you. I have two Black daughters as well. And so I agree with you. That is something that I think about constantly, which is they are amazing. And I don't want them to shrink themselves to be small so that they're okay. So that's the only personal thing I'm going to say. Now,
well, I appreciate you saying that, because I want to add one more thing, which is that I wrote it for my daughters, but that book is just as important for white children, for white boys to read, right? To see Black girls leading and living and, dare I say, aspire to their leadership and their model, right? Again, it is still such a lack of just simple, images of us living and breathing and doing what we do and being amazing, right? Just like your daughters. And white men and white boys need to believe in that. They need to see it just as much as our daughters do.
Yeah. Yes. Well said. But speaking about young girls of color who grow up to be the next generation of leaders of color, we know that women were hit particularly hard during this pandemic, and we also know that Black women were hit the hardest. So, may I ask you, if there are any specific lessons from that book, or from you do a lot of other talk. Moments where you get to talk about how we can change the narrative. Can you pull out some specific lessons that you think that you would like either those young girls who are going to become leaders or those women in the workforce right now who can help create more space and combat what we're seeing is happening right now.
Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that, right? We are seeing record numbers of women leaving the workforce simply because our society is not built for them to achieve and to be able to do all the things that we do, including balancing home with personal life and all the other things that the burdens that we all disproportionately carry in our families and society. As you said, Black women and women of color have been hardest hit, and it is a crisis. And I'm thankful that we're talking about it. I have to say though, just to zoom out, that again, I'm so thankful to be having these conversations. They are still critical. Unfortunately, they are still critical and urgent. But Alice, I'm so tired. I'm so tired of having this conversation. You asked me for my advice. It's like, it is actually really simple. This is not rocket science. It is a question of, do you have a commitment to this or not? And I have to acknowledge that, last summer, coming out of, the BLM protests after the tragic murder of George Floyd, you saw lots of corporate leaders and others step up and make commitments. And, we are a little over a year from that moment. And a lot of people have walked back their commitments. They have forgotten about their commitments. They've diluted them. And I just want to remind people that the work has not ended. And my sort of most cynical view is maybe you weren't committed to it in the first place. And we need to hold people accountable to make sure that you are, making good on those commitments and that you understand that this is ongoing work. So I think that's the most important, kind of point I want to make, that this is not hard. It takes a real commitment. Yes. And you have to build it in and bake it into the DNA of every single thing that you do. Right. And that's what we do at Phenomenal. We bring an equity lens to every single thing that we do. And if you're not willing to, right, that's when you lose sight of it. That's when it becomes an afterthought. And that's when you don't get it right. And that's when you create systemic harm, right, that is perpetuated in the policies and practices of your business, of, the companies that you're building, right? I think this is really directed towards entrepreneurs. We have an opportunity, as do I, building a business from the ground up, to ask ourselves, is this important enough to bake it into the DNA of every single thing I do, to think about every step I take, am I getting that right? And it's hard work. It's not, well, I guess on the one hand, I said it's not hard, it's easy, it's really kind of basic, right? But yes, you got to keep it top of mind, right? It's a real commitment, it's a real mindset. And if you're willing to do that, then, things will get better.
Yeah. No, I hear you. The answer is easy. The work is hard.
Exactly.
Asahi, so I feel like this is a great place for you to come into the conversation, because, so I'm going to restate that fact, which I know that you are very familiar with, but women were hit so hard, and women of no one hit harder than Black women. There's statistics, that's not just anecdotal. There's been survey after study that has shown that. So in this new normal that we, isn't going to go away for a while, women and women of color have lost equity. We've lost some strides in closing the equity gap. Can you describe, is this another pivotal moment that leaders that have made promises can step up and close that gap?
Yeah, I think we are in a pivotal moment. And unless we're intentional, and I think Mina's spot on when she talks about the fact that it's not that hard to do, right? To make the commitment. The hard part is, one, not being episodic, sticking with it for a long period of time, because ultimately this is a struggle. And struggles take consistency and persistence over time for change. One of the things that we did is we launched an initiative called 1 Million Black Women for all those ambitious girls that we're looking to cultivate. And what was interesting is, you think about 70 years ago, Malcolm X said the most neglected person in America is who? The Black woman. And that rings true 70 years later. And so what we did is we looked at our core business, and ultimately we make investments. So we've launched the largest commitment ever in the history of this country, specifically focused on Black women, called 1 Million Black Women. $10 billion over the next 10 years to impact positively the lives of at least 1 million Black women by the year 2030. It's audacious, it's bold, and it's a big commitment that really goes fundamentally to who we are in terms of the kind of society that we're looking to create. And if you think about sort of the place of whether you're working in a small business or in a big business, 10, 20 years ago, the notion that business was trying to move social change in society was really something that we weren't thinking about, far less leading social change. And so with initiatives like this, that are, I think Nina's right, that, where are those commitments? We need to hold people accountable. They need to be transparent, and we need to come back to say, okay, you said this on, in June or July of 2020. What's going on right now? Because frankly, again, it's not that hard. You have to stick with it over time, and that's balance sheet investment that Goldman Sachs is making.
Yeah, and do you think so? You launched this initiative. First of all, let me ask you, when you decided you were going to do it, were you, because that is huge. That is like, putting your money where your mouth is. Was there a piece of you that was like a little bit scared to do it? In all honesty,
No.
were you like, this is big. Am I really going to do this?
That's an easy question, Allie. Absolutely not. If there's anything Goldman Sachs knows, we know a good investment. Black women are a good investment. And trust me, we've done the math. So no, we weren't scared of it. We were scared if we didn't do it, right? What opportunities, what ambitious girls, what ambitious opportunities we're leaving on the table if we didn't do it.
Yeah, good. Well said. And so how, just because you brought it up and I am getting questions, how do Black women, how do the next women of color, how do they tap into this work that Goldman Sachs is doing? Like, how do they make sure that they get a piece of this pie?
Absolutely. So we've made it really simple. You go to the goldmansachs.com website, you click on that button called, the Million Black Women website, and you're able to sign up to be to receive information about the work that we're doing. If you have a proposal, you could submit the proposal as a part of that. On top of the $10 billion, we have $100 million of philanthropic dollars as well. And so we've gotten proposals that have come in through that portal on the website, and we've made grants on the back of reading it on the website, contacting the organization. So it is real, it is authentic what we're doing. And that's really, we've had 44 listening sessions so far. 18,000 women around the country have tuned into those listening sessions. And we're building our program from there with architect by Black women, with Black women, for Black women, because they're a great investment.
I love it. Okay, I have another audience question. Men have more conversations growing up on how to build a business, financial literacy, etc. What are resources women can use to have the same knowledge? Maëlle, because you were next in line, if you have a good answer, I give you first dibs on that. But if, I also open it up to whoever would like to answer that.
To me, besides if the question was specifically about research and reading books, honestly, there's plenty, and nothing comes to my mind right now, but I could probably turn around and recommend a bunch. But my recommendation actually would be to not necessarily read, but to actually connect. The power of sisterhood is unbelievable when it's unleashed. I'm part of many network of women, but we don't always spend the time to do it. And I know that's because we do have a lot of other things to do, but tap into that, talk to other women.
And where do you find, if you don't know where to start, where do you find those, I guess, so the question is around the resource. So if the resource is the network, where do you find that network?
I'm going to do a bit of self-promotion. I'm sorry, but you know what you can do? We run Techstars, run startup weekends all around the world every weekend. There's very likely one in your city, in your state, coming very soon. Go to one of them. If you're an entrepreneur and want to be an entrepreneur and you have a business in your head, and come and apply to a Techstars accelerator. This is quite literally what we do. And sorry, it's a little bit of self-promotion, but I couldn't pass on that one.
Yeah, no, they asked. There was a question. You had to do it. Okay, so I knew this would happen. 2 minutes left. Where did the time go? So I'm going to start the part that I call the lightning round, which is that I'm going to ask a question of all three of you. I'm going to ask one question and ask you all the answer in 30 seconds. If we can do it in 30 seconds, I can get two in. So the first question, I'm going to start with you, Mina. Any final tips for business leaders and business owners on how they can best navigate this crazy time that we're in right now?
That's the biggest question to have to ask that I have to answer in 30 seconds. Okay, do the work. You know, we've been talking about this throughout this entire conversation. Make the commitment and stick with it, and you know, expect that people are going to demand to see results, and that's what's, you know, on the rest of us. I'm so inspired by the labor movement right now. Asahi talked about how people are looking for leaders, and I think that's absolutely right. So much of this comes down to leadership, leading from the top. It comes down to management, but also the power is in the people. And if you're not leading, they are going to make sure that you do, or they're going to be leading and are going to be demanding that. So it's incumbent upon all of us to be a active participant in that, you know, reciprocal conversation, right, from the bottom up and the top down and bottom up.
Yeah. You're right. It was a big question, but you did it beautifully. Asahi, back to you. So any tips for how leaders can navigate these crazy waters that we're living in right now, working through?
I'd say 3 things really quickly. One, I'd say, you know, prepare yourself and your business, not only for the now economy, but for the new economy in terms of where the world is going. The second thing I'd say is don't over prioritize experience over talent, over indexing on experience over talent. You're going to miss out on some amazing people if you do that. I bet on talent any day. I bet on Mina, I bet on Mayal, I bet on Ali. I bet on talent over experience and give people opportunity. And the last thing I'd say is embrace failure and calculate it into your model. As entrepreneurs, many of you know that. So when failure comes, you'll say, hello, old friend, I was expecting you. And then you amp up your business to find opportunity on the back of it.
Oh yeah, resiliency. I like it. And Mayal, I'm going to close it out with you. Any tips for leaders on how they can think about navigating these crazy waters?
Yes, and I agree with everything that was just said. So I would say, number one, don't forget that nobody succeeds alone. And it is particularly true in difficult, chaotic environment that keeps changing. Your team is there, bring them in, give them context, give them transparency, surround yourself. I'm going to go back to our favorite topic at Techstars, which is surround yourself by a network, build network. You'll be amazed by the number of people where if you ask them for help, they're going to want to help you. And then the second thing, which is a personal topic of mine, which is empathy. I believe that business leader who consciously on a daily, weekly, monthly basis work on their empathy and their ability to listen to people and really understand what the people they are interacting with, whether this is their employee, their customers, their client, their partners, are going through. The leaders who make the effort to really understand that make way better decisions. So empathy, develop your empathy.
I love it. Well, I am not going to get another question in, which means that I'll have to have you all back another time, which, you know, is my great joy, because I think I think it was Mina who said it's exhausting, but I always find it less exhausting when I know that there are women leaders out there like you. And I truly mean this when I say that this is my favorite part of my job, being around inspirational women who help us think about where to go next. So thank you for being here with us. Thank you to the audience. And I really do hope to connect with all of you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When your business is built on connections, it only gets stronger when your tools connect together too. So you can take payments everywhere and send invoices when you're not actually there. And your money is available quickly, so you can use it quickly. With Square, your business is all connected, so you can focus on the connections that matter most.
Now for our next conversation, building a relationship with the post-pandemic customer. Please welcome Sawmill Mehta, Global Head of Customers, Square, and interviewer Diane Brady, Assistant Managing Editor, Communities and Leadership, Forbes.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. What a great conversation so far. And Sawmill, great to see you here.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Very welcome. Well, you're Global Head of Customers. Take us to the front lines and tell us, what are you seeing? What's changed?
Thank you for having me today. It's been a crazy 18 months, obviously, through the pandemic, for us, for all of our customers, for consumers writ large all over the world. Several things that are possibly unexpected that have changed. Maybe I'll walk you through a couple of those. I think the first one that's worth sharing is the expansion of digital wallets, P2P payments, into other areas like commerce and cashlessness. So a few years ago, things like Cash App, which obviously is part of Square, were popular but relatively niche use cases. As of today, through the pandemic, usage, new consumers, existing consumers, usage base has absolutely exploded. And what's more interesting is the expansion into other parts of commerce, not just paying your friends, but now actually doing transactions with businesses.
And is that because we don't want to go to the ATMs because we're, holed up at home, or what do you think's the reason for that?
It's anything that you're going to start doing with the people in your life, friends and so on, is eventually going to become habitual. And once it's habitual, it's a natural expansion into the other parts of your commercial life, not to mention the significant convenience of that. And so this is why our Square point of sale product now actually allows you to pay with Cash App at the point of sale. We just launched it. We're really excited about it. And this also ties into this other big trend around cashlessness, right? So I'll give you a couple of data points that may be interesting. At the start of the pandemic, about 15% of our UK businesses were cashless. Cashless as in, 95% plus of their transactions are without cash. Today, it's nearly 50%, right? So more than 3x up just through 18 months. In the US, which is obviously we're a much bigger scale in the US, it was 5% cashless, just 5% at the start of the pandemic. Now it's up to 15%. That's a huge number of businesses that are almost entirely cashless. And we saw this big spike at the start of the pandemic, came down a little bit, and then it plateaued at a much bigger number, 3 times, right? So cashlessness, P2P payments, expansion of commerce, one big trend. The other related trend we're seeing is around things like self-use gift cards, right? So
self-use gift. So that's me buying a gift for myself.
Exactly. We print
millions Christmas in my family.
Exactly. We print like millions of these every year. We sell millions of these just digitally, right? Without any plastic. And what we started to observe, which was mind-blowing, is about a third of them are being purchased for self-use, which is
really, I have not seen that out there. So 1/3 of all the gift cards purchased are people buying. Why would you buy a gift card for yourself? What's the logic of that?
Yeah, we think it's part of this kind of broad diversion of credit, essentially. So what we've found with consumers that we've talked to and businesses that we talk to, it's frequently considered to be one of these like budgeting tools, actually, because if you
so you control how much you can spend somewhere by buying yourself a gift card. That's fascinating.
Right. You've got $100 on it, and you know that you got to make this $100 last until the end of the month.
Now, if I am a retailer, of which there are many, many of the next 1,000 are creators, they're people who have e-commerce businesses and such. How do you take advantage of that? Do you start marketing your gift cards now for self-use, or this sounds like it happened by serendipity almost?
Certainly did. We've always had some self-use, but yeah, I mean, we would encourage we certainly encourage our customers, and we'd say that for anybody in the Forbes Next 1000, which is don't sleep on gift cards. Essentially, it's a powerful mechanism to engage your consumers, and now it's yet more powerful because of this new kind of self-use trend. And we're certainly leaning into it. I'll tell you another trend that you might find interesting. So a few years ago, I'd have all these smart engineers, designers come to me and pitch me ideas tied to QR codes, right? And I'd be like, certainly in the US, I was like, nobody's going to use that. I would never say that now, obviously.
No, you can't eat in a restaurant without your QR code.
There you go. And they're everywhere now, right? So we've got them for tableside ordering, super popular. We've got them for gift cards, actually. If you buy a plastic gift card from us, on the back of it, we've got a QR code now, which we never had before, to like find your balance. Because how do you know what's on the gift card, how much money's left without a QR code? We've got them for this integration between Cash App and our point of sale, where you pay with a QR code. And so other countries have been kind of ahead of us on this QR code trend, right? Like places like China and India. But now the US has like really, really accelerated in terms of consumer behavior.
Besides seamlessness in terms of less friction for me as the consumer, what benefit would I as a business have in using a QR code? Does it give me more granular data? Is it just simply that I'm easing kind of the onboarding of the customer experience, or what's in it for me?
It really is this notion around friction and also simplifying your operations. So you think about we think a lot about line speed, right, with a lot of our businesses, because the thing that always, and our businesses think a lot about, like right before lunch, it's like I've got the line kind of going crazy. Well, guess what? If you have this other modality called a QR code, you can actually start to process orders in parallel while people are waiting in line even, right? And so now the line is no longer an ordering line. It actually is partly an ordering line and it's partly a pickup line.
The smart people at the coffee shop who go to the front and the coffee's waiting while I am fifth behind.
Exactly.
No, one of the things with the pandemic, obviously there have been a lot of challenges, and we've seen this in some cases, this influx of a lot of capital to support businesses. What are you seeing at this juncture right now? Are there particular challenges that are starting to emerge? I know we're talking about some new behaviors. Are there new behaviors as well on the part of the businesses and the retailers and such that are using your technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So we think a lot. I mean, one of our biggest priorities going back 4 or 5 years at this point is what we would call Omni-Channel Commerce, which is, we think about that as reversion of control and power into the hands of the buyer and the consumer, right? It used to be—
That's like online, offline, wherever I want to get you, I can get you.
Yeah, I as a consumer reserve the right to message you whenever I feel like it and maybe expect a response 24/7. I expect to purchase anytime I feel like it. I expect to purchase and engage with your business on any device and any form factor that I feel like it. And I expect everything to be synced online and offline, right? So if you have a loyalty program in your store, it better work when I also buy stuff online. That's not common, actually. And you can find very large retailers where the loyalty program works offline, but not online, right? So all of this stuff has kind of really accelerated and really increased over the last 18 months. And so now you think about the challenges on the business side, right? So there's 2 or 3 big ones. So the first one is, this stuff feels kind of easy. It's like, oh, it's just online ordering, right?
Looks easy, right?
Yeah, it looks easy, deceptively simple, right? Extremely thorny in practice. Why is that? Because you have to run everything on a common platform for all your data to actually sync online, offline, mobile web, desktop web, mobile devices, apps, you name it, right? So your consumer data, right? Like, who is this customer? What's their identity? How much have they bought with me in the last 3 years? What's their favorite thing to buy with me? All of that needs to be available everywhere, right? You got to run it on a common platform. Your inventory, by the way, super critical, right? Like,
I was going to say, that's the issue for me. I'm so spoiled now. I walk into a store and it's like, they don't have my size. I know they have it, online. So,
or you could have another problem, which we've seen and heard about, which is you sell it online, but you don't have the inventory because you processed the order, you took the payment, but guess what? Like, there's a big line at the store, and so a bunch of people bought the same thing, and now you're out of the inventory. And your inventory didn't sync online and offline. It's an extremely common problem, right?
It's called a sneaker drop in my house. Yes.
Exactly.
Sold out right away. One of the things that I think is really interesting as we've talked about these habits that have changed, I'm actually quite intrigued with, because I have teenagers, the Cash App and how you've expanded that to teens. I think financial literacy is so important across the board. I'd love to talk about some of the opportunities that you see in terms of, frankly, getting us to understand spending, spend smarter. And hope it doesn't take you too much out of your wheelhouse, but it's just something I've noticed in the last few weeks. Love to hear more.
It does take me out of my wheelhouse.
Okay, just for a minute then, just because I've been trying to get my kids to download it, because I think it's really powerful actually when you have kids that are used to online, they live online, to now have the means to actually be, frankly, spending and seeing the consequences on a more granular level, I think is very powerful.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, one of the macro trends that we've touched upon is the digitization of money and money movement, and the digitization of all the commercial use cases attached to it, whether it's paying your rent, paying your friends, buying Bitcoin, buying stocks, buying fractional quantities of stock, right? And
Meta does not advise you buy Bitcoin.
Well,
Okay, another conversation. That's our critical conference. We'll have you back.
But nonetheless, I mean, to your point, right? Like anything we can do to encourage teens, consumers writ large, to spend responsibly, to spend with a budget, to understand the real world consequences of the way you manage your money, and to have a healthy, productive, successful relationship with money is certainly time and effort well spent. And obviously, Cash App for Teens just launched recently, last couple of weeks, and I'm super excited about it. I don't have teenagers, unlike you, but if I did, I certainly would be first.
I'm so excited to be putting my credit card away, Samal. I can't tell you. It's like, go use your Cash App. But let me go back to customers and ask you, if I'm a customer, you're on the front lines, you see what the smart folks are doing. Where would you be prioritizing right now? You did mention, obviously, the omni-channel sounds easy, it's tough. Are there particular areas that you think really warrant a hard look and strong investment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the good news is that even though the world around has changed through the pandemic, the fundamental kind of customer lifecycle is still the same, right? In terms of commerce, it's still awareness, consideration, conversion, retention, advocacy, right? That hasn't changed.
Yep.
It's just super blurry, online, offline, and it's everywhere, all devices, et cetera, but the life cycle is still the same. So what I would tell folks in the audience, emerging retailers, amazing entrepreneurs, is mirror your customer life cycle and invest omni-channel while mirroring your customer life cycle. So the foundation is still the customer.
Know your customer, basically, right?
And how do they buy? How do they proceed through the buyer's journey online and offline? The difference is now it's all blurry, but the life cycle is still the same. So let's give you some examples, right? Let's say you are a pool repair business. We have a bunch of pool repair businesses on Square, right? That's a very episodic service that you're gonna, when you need
December's a slow month.
When you need it. Well, when you need it, you really need it. And it's an expensive service. And so a business like that needs to have an amazing website. They've got to have amazing lead gen forms. They've got to have amazing software for estimation, contracts, invoices. Would plug Square Invoices, unbiased. But on the flip side, you're a coffee shop with an offline point of sale. It's like the average ticket size is $10. So you don't have to worry about lead gen and invoices.
Right.
Directly.
Always more people needing coffee.
Exactly. And they're going to walk into your store frequently, but they're also going to buy your beans online. And so you still need a website, but you probably want the website to be focused on commerce. You want it to be focused on loyalty. You want to be able to sell gift cards. And you've got all that working offline as well. So it really depends upon the type of business.
Now, in the last 30 seconds, I want to tap into your soothsayer. Anything around the corner on your radar that you want to put on ours?
Absolutely. Lot of amazing trends that we're watching. Mixed use businesses, right? The lines of like retail, restaurant, services, it's all blurry. Everybody's doing everything. Mixed use business is a big one. Hyper personalization to attract customers is a big one. Buy online, pick up in store. Social media shopping, mobile commerce, and I'm probably out of time, but the list goes on.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. You win. That's wonderful. Well, listen, Samal, thank you very much. Great insights. I'm going to go buy myself a gift card and appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Bye now.
Enjoy the rest of the event, everyone.
Now for our next discussion, the Next 1000 interview, building a $1 billion business from the ground up. Please welcome Sarah Blakely, founder and executive chairwoman, Spanx, and interviewer Maneet Ahuja, senior editor, Forbes.
Sarah, it is such an honor. Thank you so much for joining us for this special conversation for our inaugural Next 1000 Summit in celebration of the most intrepid founders and business owners from every corner of the US. Yours is truly a story of the American dream, from starting Spanx with $5,000 in personal savings and bootstrapping the business to the $1 billion+ enterprise sold in over 50 countries that stands today. The name of your brand has become synonymous with what it represents. Shapewear that has the power to make women feel invincible. Many of us know at least a little something about your background, but can you take us back to the beginning of it all? I'll set the scene. It's 1998, you're getting ready for a party when you realize you didn't have the right undergarment.
Hi, Money. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to, fellow entrepreneurs. Listen, the soundbite in the media for 20 years has been Sarah cut the feet out of her pantyhose because she couldn't figure out what to wear to a party. And while that's true, I want to give you a little bit of the backstory of that. So I grew up on a beach in Florida, Clearwater Beach. And I'd never taken a business class in my life. I'd never worked in fashion or retail. I actually wanted to be a lawyer, and I'm a really bad test taker. So I bombed the LSAT, not once, but twice. And I was not able to really get into a law school. So I ended up, which most people would do if you bombed the LSAT and dashed your dreams of being a lawyer. I drove to Disney World and I tried out to be goofy. And you have to be 5'8", Money, to be goofy. Who knew? I'm only 5'6". I was the perfect height of a chipmunk. So I worked at Disney World for a few months, and then I ended up selling fax machines door to door in Clearwater, Florida for 7 years. So wow. I got a lot of business cards ripped up in my face. I did a lot of being escorted out of buildings. And one day I pulled off the side of the road, Money, and I had had a really tough day. I was crying. And I just remember thinking, I'm in the wrong movie. Like, call the director, call the producer, cut. This is not my life. And I went to my apartment and I wrote down a goal. And I said, I know that I like to sell. I like offering something to someone that they didn't already have or might help their life. And so once I identified that, I wrote down, I want to invent a product that I can sell to millions of people that will make them feel good. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I just knew. I set that intention. I looked up in the sky and I said to the universe, you have to give me this idea and I will not squander it. And 2 years later, I'm still selling fax machines. I'm still, doing what I had been doing. But I cut the feet out of control top pantyhose one night to go to a party and wear them under cream pants because everything showed. And I thought this might be my idea. And because I had set that intention 2 years prior, I was constantly searching for what my idea was going to be. So I actually only cut the feet out of my control top pantyhose one time. Wow. When I created the company. And that set me on the path to try to create, I was a frustrated consumer, which a lot of inventions just come from frustrated consumers. And what I ended up creating worked better for me in my closet than anything else I could find in the store.
That's incredible. So it really shows the power of mindset. And on that point, we were just talking about mindset. Where do you feel like that came from you, and how has it helped you? I mean, we see where you are today, but if, you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So mindset is really a big part of my journey. And I say this all the time, and I truly believe it, but mindset is the single greatest asset that an entrepreneur has. And it's something we have to work on daily. We literally have to make it part of our daily routine. There's so much negative stimuli happening, and so just like you go to a chiropractor, if your back gets out of alignment, or we go to the gym and we work on our physical, what are we doing daily to work on our mental? Like, how are we beginning, positive mindset. How are we working on that? Because being an entrepreneur is nothing but navigating obstacles daily. It's just a, constant, like, putting out fires and figuring out this is the end. No, it's not the end. I'm going to make it lemon into lemonade. But I would say, Maneet, this started for me really early when I was 16 years old. I had gone through a series of tragedies in high school, and they were really heartbreaking for me. And around that same time, my dad and mom got separated. And my dad came into my bedroom and he said, "Sweetie, I wish I was your age when I discovered this instead of the age of 40. And he handed me a cassette tape series of 10 tapes. And it was by Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's a motivational, inspirational speaker. And it said how to be a no limit person. And Maneet, I had never heard of this, thought of it, but I was so broken and sad and not in a good place that, I always say there's a hidden blessing in every situation in our life and all the dark times. My hidden blessing was I was so down and desperate. I was willing to listen to these cassette tapes of a middle-aged bald man with a bushy mustache, which most 16-year-old girls would have chucked that in the bottom of their closet. I put the tapes in and I started crying, and I thought to myself, I have spent 16 years in school being taught what to think, but no one has ever taught me how to think. And the light bulb went off for me that I am in control of how I think. I can process things in a way that either propels me forward or holds me back. And I became a lifelong student that day of mindset. And Wayne Dyer back then taught me about law of attraction, manifesting what you want, visualization, which have all been tools that I use to take on $1 billion industry with an endless ad budget with my $5,000. And I really think that's part of my secret weapon. And you know what's funny, Maneet? I went to Clearwater High, and in high school, nobody ever wanted to be trapped in my car after a party because they're like, she's going to make you listen to that crap. I always had the cassette tapes going, but then fast forward all those years, I ended up on the cover of Forbes, and all my friends from Clearwater High, they texted me and all they wrote was, "Damn, should have listened to that shit."
Oh my God, that's great. I actually just started listening to Wayne Dyer because my massage therapist was speaking his praises, and I'd heard his name, but I actually was listening to it, and it really, it has to come at you at the right moment in your life, as you mentioned, right, to where you're receptive to it. And I was in a similar spot, so that's so interesting to hear. Even for you, it was this David and Goliath situation where you took on a huge industry, right? The odds couldn't have been more stacked against you, but it really was a tool that, we all have, and that's the power of harnessing our mindset. And so, as you said, when you started Spanx, you never worked in retail or fashion before. Did that have any effect on your confidence? I mean, I think, we're following a trail here with this mindset discussion.
Absolutely it did. But because I've been working on mindset since I was 16, it didn't shake my confidence. I had this belief, and I've been listening to conversations and reading books about trust your inner knowing. We all have an inner knowing. And so I think because I've been doing that work, I was willing to take the leap knowing nothing. And what I tell people now is, what you don't know will be your greatest asset if you let it, because it means you don't know how it's supposed to be done. And when you don't know how it's supposed to be done, there's the innovation, there's the magic. We're all on autopilot in life. We're doing things exactly the way someone showed us how to do it. We either were taught it in school, we saw someone else do it. They were like, "Here, good morning. This is how you brush your teeth. This is how you eat your breakfast. This is how would we be doing all that stuff if no one showed us?" And that's literally how I went through the Spanx journey. And, the confidence piece is really big, because to stand in a room full of experts and be the girl with no experience whatsoever and be willing to have the confidence to keep pushing back. And you got to push back in a really strategic way, because when I'm starting out, I had no money, no contacts. I'm standing in the manufacturing floor saying, well, why is it done that way? Like, why are you guys putting a rubber cord inside of all of our waistbands? And they'd say, well, that's because that's what keeps it up. And I'd say, well, right, but we've made a lot of advancements in yarn with Lycra, is there a chance we took the rubber cord out? Would it still stay up? And just asking questions like that. And they go, no, it won't stay up. And I'd say, well, have we tried it? Has anybody tried this recently? And then I would just press them on it. And so Spanx created products that were giving women tremendous comfort and results, and was a game changer in women's closets around the world. And that was all just from someone with no previous experience being willing to stand in a room with experts and challenge the way it was done.
Yeah, and I think I remember from an earlier interview I read with you from years ago, or maybe it was an interview we did together, but I think the shock that you said individuals felt when they said, how did you get into Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, these huge big box retailers with zero industry contacts? And I think you had said, well, you just picked up the phone and called, and their jaws dropped open, right? And that was also, to your point, you didn't know any better because you hadn't been in the industry, but you had that confidence. And speaking of confidence, when I go on stage for any speaking event, I love to wear your moto leggings. They give me the confidence. And so yeah, I mean, now you're paying it forward with that too. So in the beginning, you really mastered the art of sharing your story, which you do so beautifully, and sharing the why behind the product, particularly as you had to pitch so many men. Now that Spanx has become successful for so long, over 20 years, do those early years still inform how you lead your business today?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's critical for you to share the why behind what you're doing. People are really focused on the what, but consumers get very connected to the why. And so from the very beginning, I was like, here's my product, but let me tell you why I did it. And I kept staying very focused on the why. I always say, sell the problem you're solving, not the product. People are far more emotional about that. And my why also was about women. I feel very strongly that I was given this opportunity. I was born in the right place at the right time. I had nothing to do with those two things. I saw my mom and my grandmother's lack of options, and a lot of women still around the world today that don't have the option to fulfill their potential. And so that was a real strong why for me, was to make the most and to push myself as hard as I could in areas that scared me on behalf of the women that don't have that chance. And also, Manit, when I stood on the floor 21 years ago in the manufacturing plant, I looked to my right and I looked to my left, and there was not a woman in the room. And I thought, I'm going to advocate for women through product. Like, somebody needs to be standing in this room going, but we're really uncomfortable, or it's digging, like I can't breathe, like it's not working, or it's leaving a big bulge on my thigh under my full slacks. So that became a passion for me, and staying connected to the why. People hear that, they're so much more invested than if they just hear, well, here's my product. It's a footless pantyhose. You can wear it with open-toed shoes and not have a panty line. That's important to kind of get it, but without telling them the why, you're missing a huge piece.
Right. Especially people that aren't directly, maybe people that you're selling to, like perhaps men, like you said, but aren't having that firsthand frustration or experience too, Right. So you talk a lot about the importance of fearing failure and making mistakes. And why do you think that that's so crucial to be successful? We all face tons of failure, and, it dissuades a lot of founders and entrepreneurs from picking themselves back up. I would say a tremendous amount. Why is it so critical to the path to success?
So, I think the greatest fear is fear of failure for human beings. And when I sit and think about that, I'm like, what is it about the fear of failure? I also think it's connected to the fear of being embarrassed. Those things. And that really comes down to caring a lot about what other people think about you. And that's something I've been working on with mindset since I was 16. I'm a work in progress, but if there's anything I can recommend you guys work on, is that, like, really freeing yourself up from what other people think. So I will intentionally embarrass myself. I mean, if like a month goes by and I haven't done something embarrassing, I'm like, oh, I got to go embarrass myself, because I found that when I do that, it loses its power. And what I realize is when when you make a mistake or you have a failure or you have an embarrassing moment, if you allow it to become a great story, you've got a great asset, because that's like a really wonderful way to connect with other human beings, other customers, is through that vulnerability that we share with each other. So I kind of see oops and failures as like gifts, like a gem, like, oh, good. Thank you for that. I'm going to use it and make someone else feel really good or not as alone, or I'll be able to connect in a way. And growing up, my dad taught my brother and me to fail. He encouraged us to fail. I would sit at the dinner table and my dad would say, Sarah, what have you failed at this week?
I remember that story. Yeah. And you do really put your money where your mouth is, where the embarrassing situations are concerned. Because you also had done stand-up comedy for a little bit, right? To kind of.
I did, which is absolutely terrifying. I mean, that is so terrifying. But, I used a lot of what I learned in stand-up comedy in my marketing. I think making somebody laugh or smile is so powerful. And I used humor as a secret weapon up against the billion-dollar companies for sure. And the best way, when people say, well, I'm not funny, it's like, well, be vulnerable, like, show your humanness. Like, humanness is going to connect you to people and make other people laugh and feel good more than anything, more than telling like the best joke, But my dad encouraged us to fail, and that was huge because he reframed my definition of failure. It didn't become about the outcome. It became about not trying. And I would come home and say, Dad, I failed at this. And he would high five me. And
wow. That wasn't my experience growing up.
Right. And so a lot of us are also afraid to fail because like, we don't want to disappoint parents. We don't want to disappoint, other loved ones. So that was very freeing that he did that for my brother and me.
You've always been very passionate about infusing your brand with playfulness and humor. And one of Spanx's taglines is making the world a better place, one butt at a time. How can people, especially women, use humor in business and sales to their advantage?
I would just say by being vulnerable, like also just being, I believe when I started Spanx 21 years ago, I was like, everybody's so serious in business. Why is everything so serious? Do we have to act this serious? And so I remember thinking, I don't want to have to act serious to be taken seriously, And so I use playfulness. I'm silly. I'm just, willing to laugh at myself. At Spanx, back to the failure, we have things called oops meetings where we celebrate our oops, and I'll stand up in front of the company and tell them what I messed up at. Other people in the company are invited to share their oops. A lot of times we put theme songs with them. So we'll look
That's
up.
hilarious.
They're hilarious. Like one of the things, so I made a whole list of the songs that went with it and presented one day all the things that we had not been doing right throughout the history of the company. But as far as being silly and playful, I in the marketing, I was like, I just want to talk to the consumer the way I would talk to my friends at dinner. And I felt 21 years ago, it was very different. I mean, everybody was, I felt like the industry in all industries acted like, if I don't act serious and act like the expert, you might not think I'm credible enough. And then therefore you won't buy my product. Well, I showed up and I'm like, I laminated a picture of my own butt in pants from Kinko's, and I'm standing at Neiman Marcus with like the fanciest women ever. And I'm holding this Kinko's laminated copy of my rear end. And I'm like, look what this can do for you. So, I mean, I just took a very different approach and I think it worked. I mean, Spanx never advertised for 16 years and we became a global household name.
Right.
And that's incredible with no advertising. And I think it's just because women felt so connected to it and shared it with other women.
I mean, I have to admit though, the packaging though was very appealing because I think I was like, in my teens when it came out, and previous to that, my mom would always talk about like a girdle or shapewear, and I'd feel like that's for grandmas. But then the red packaging with the cute girl and the butt reference on the front and her high heels just made it seem like a cool it product. And speaking more on like scalability, transitioning a little bit, the brand and product that you created was totally new, right? It was a industry category creator, a need that had gone unaddressed for over the last 20 years. We've seen Spanx create this whole new category. As I said, what advice do you have for people who get frustrated with competition or copycat brands? How have you personally approached this?
Well, I mean, I've had people copy me for the last 20 years, and my advice is I don't pay much attention to the competition at all. I mean, I'm an innovator, and I've told the company, you know, I wake up every day and there's innovators and there's imitators, and I'd far rather be an innovator. It's harder, it requires more work, but it's so much more rewarding. So the only time I would ever pay attention to the competition is through innovation. If I'm innovating, if the team and I have a new idea for women, we would want to know, hey, does this already exist? You know, we thought of this, but so I would check that market for that. You can also be checking the market for weaknesses, you know, like I'm a consumer and what's not working about what's out there. And that's a really fun place to try to create product and services. But I have not focused on the competition. I find that when you start to really pay attention to the competition, that's when things are probably not, they're probably going to start heading south for you as a company. Like those are little indicators. In 21 years, you know, we've had moments where the team started getting a little too preoccupied with that. And I'm like, this is a flag. What is this telling us about ourselves?
Right.
You know,
that's a good insight.
I've had competition serve me really well. I had big companies knock me off very early on, and they spent $8 to $20 million on ad budgets that gave awareness for the product that I had just created, and my product was superior, so it ended up benefiting me.
Working to your advantage. So I know we're just about at time, but I have two last quick important questions. So especially pursuant to this audience. So giving back has been such an important part of your business from the beginning. You've also been a huge supporter of small businesses, many of whom are in the audience today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your philanthropic work and your most recent efforts with the Bread Backpack Fund?
Sure. I mean, during the pandemic, I saw that women were being disproportionately impacted, very much so. And so I ended up donating. Yeah, I know. It's just unbelievable. So I ended up donating $5 million. I gave 5,000 different entrepreneurs. I gave 1,000 different entrepreneurs $5,000 each, which is what I started Spanx with. And I just did that to try to help get them through this difficult time, bridge a gap. They were small startup businesses, but you know, they made a difference. And I'm just so proud of that and happy for that. And that's the Red Backpack Fund. I named it that because I started Spanx with my lucky red backpack from college, which now hangs framed in a clear box at the Spanx headquarters, but it really is lucky. I'm telling you, it is. So I gave each woman with the money her own lucky red backpack as well. But, you know, I just want to say, Monique, there's 50% of small business entrepreneurs are women, and only 2.3% of VC funding is going to women. So there is a tremendous gap there. And I'm happy to do my part and what I can to try to fund a lot of those women out there that are starting out and trying to make a difference.
That's awesome. That's incredible. And the way that you pay it forward and your give back nature, we're going to get right back to that. But one quick important last question was on, this is a full circle moment for you, having sold a majority stake of your business to Blackstone. Why now? And what made you land on Blackstone as the right custodian to take Spanx into the future?
You know, I am someone who operates off of gut and intuition, and people have been asking me for 21 years, when am I going to sell? Who would I sell to? And I just always knew I would know. And the time is now. It's the right time for the business. We've pivoted into activewear, apparel, swim. And the business is doing phenomenal. And to have a partner like Blackstone with global resources is just the right time for the business. And it's the right time for me personally. So, you know, I still own a significant stake in the business, and I'm still going to play a role in product, which is my favorite part of the business. And super excited about the future for the brand and also new beginnings.
And on a final note, we all saw the incredible news on social media that you gifted all of Spanx employees 2 first-class tickets anywhere in the world plus $10,000. I'm the first to admit I was pretty jealous. What made you decide to do that?
I spent a lot of time as I knew the deal was getting nearer. It became a real focus for me on how can I include the employees in this. And it just felt like I wanted them to have an experience. My motto in life is the more you experience in life, the more you have to offer others. And I knew that, a lot of times people aren't willing, or they don't spend money on themselves. Like if they just receive money, it ends up not being spent on themselves. So I thought if I give them 2 first-class tickets and the money for the trip, they're going to go create a memory for themselves to celebrate this big milestone in the brand's history. And that's how I landed on that. And it was really exciting and fun. And I was thrilled to be able to do it. I had no idea the video was going to go so viral. I probably would have worn more than a white t-shirt, but anyway.
And in corporations all across the world, I think. I know definitely with me and my Forbes colleagues, we were like, where would we go if we had that experience?
Yeah. Well, I was happy to be able to do it, so it's great.
Well, I think you have a little something you wanted to share with our audience here today as well before we say goodbye, right?
I do, Manit. It's not 2 first-class tickets to anywhere in the world. I'm sorry about that. But it is really good. It is really good. So 2 things. One is if you're not following me on Instagram and you want to, I'm at Sarah Blakely. And if you just put #Forbes in my latest post in a comment, I'm going to pick several of you and send you my masterclass for free. And that's got all kinds of insights about my journey.
Wow.
And then the other thing is if you go to Spanx.com for the next 24 hours, and when you check out, you just type in the word Forbes, we're going to knock 20% off everything that you're getting. And that's something Spanx only does once a year during Black Friday. We never do that. We have so many amazing products, and a lot of them are probably going to be gone by Black Friday. So this is like a little preview for you guys to go grab what you want and get 20% off everything.
Well, that's so generous and incredible, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us and inspiring our next 1,000 audience of entrepreneurs with your incredible story.
Thank you so much, Manit. It's a pleasure.
Being in business now means being everywhere at once. And it's easier to connect with customers when your tools connect together too. You can sell in more places and track it all in one place. So what's in stock and what's not syncs up with what your customers want. With Square, every side of your business is connected, so you can focus on shaping how you'll do business next.
Now for our next conversation, the next stage, channeling the consumer in a new era. Please welcome Tim Angelillo, founder, Sourced Craft Cocktails. Allison Devane, founder and owner, Teespressa. Jackie Wynn, owner, Cafe Cafe. Shahira Marai, founder, The Dirty Cookie. And moderator, Raquel Harris, reporter, Forbes.
All right. Thank you so much to my amazing panelists for being here to talk about this. Before we begin, I do want to let all of our viewers know that you can submit questions for our panelists, submit them via Slido, and I will be taking them throughout the conversation and some at the end as well. So just to start, this is a conversation that's all about the consumer. So my first question is, what are some of the consumer trends that you guys are seeing in your respective industries, and how are you keeping up with them? I'll pose that to Tim first.
Rocky, thanks so much for having me. It is an honor to be here and join this great panel. And yes, we should kick off the party by talking about cocktails. Clearly, the place to start. And when you think about kind of the new era of the consumer, the alcohol industry is a very interesting place to start from a sandbox perspective, because it really poses the perfect juxtaposition. On the regulatory side, you have an industry that's $254 billion a year that's recession-proof, but it hasn't innovated the distribution model in 88 years, since December 5th, 1933. And it was a small informal document. It's the 21st Amendment to our United States Constitution. On the other side, you have the consumer who has one of these. It's what we refer to as your remote control to life. right? And it gets you everything you want delivered from your phone to your front door. Thank you, Mr. Bezos and Amazon, for level setting that for the rest of the marketplace. And that's really what Sourced saw 7 years ago. And that's what we built, was the legal distribution from your phone to your front door, solving through the regulatory environment so that you can actually have and enjoy a cocktail in the same way you can every other category that our CEO, our chief entertainment officer, who is our consumer, how she likes to operate the rest of her world. And I think it's important not to just chase the consumer from trend to trend, but to really look at the entirety of where is that consumer going to be in the next 5 years, and how does that juxtapose to your individual industry. And that's really what we solved at Source Craft Cocktails to become the largest craft cocktail delivery business in the country.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Tim said, I mean, for example, I make these sugar cubes that make, at first we designed to make instant flavored lattes for our teas, because we have these teas that we have patents on. I personally take a look at the consumer trends, go to trade shows and see where consumer and based on those, that's actually how we shifted our model from going to the latte to a cocktail cube. And how Tim was saying about the convenience, and especially with COVID happening, and everybody was kind of into doing things at home, the DIY thing, and wanting to have that experience. And that was a big part of the consumer trend too that I was seeing. And so for me, I really built my business kind of around what the consumers were wanting. And even though my company started as tea, we shifted to the cocktail cubes, and now we're kind of branching off into our own, into another branch in the company. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And Jackie, Shahira?
Yeah, something that resonates with me that I wanted to transform was transparency, because I know that consumers, obviously in COVID, needed to have access to their phone 24/7, right? They're sitting at home. They want to know how to support causes, what companies are doing to pivot, especially like people are so concerned about their health. They're so concerned about what companies are doing. And so with Cafe, we made sure that we were 150% transparent with every single thing, from our values to our morals, to our ethics, to how we were going to keep safe, how we were going to serve coffee in a day and age where, restaurants and bars are all shutting down, in the middle of everything. And so something that I've kept really consistent is being very, very raw and real with my consumers, because listen, like with access to your phone 24/7, they're going to clock you. They're going to know everything that you're doing. And to me, I wanted to really be as open as possible, because I think that that's the way that business is moving now anyway. People are going to ask questions. People are going to troll you. People are going to tweet, Instagram, social media. And so I think that not only should we be pivoting to consumers' needs, physically, logistically, but also emotionally and spiritually. And listen, like that's the reality. People are going to want to know where your values lie, what your company is doing. Are you treating people with equity? And so that's something I've really tried to include in my business as well.
Yeah, Jackie, yeah, same exact thing. Transparency is to trust. During COVID, I had to lay off my entire team for over 2 months. And as soon as that happened, I put a video out there to all my customers, letting them know. And I got the most amazing support I'd ever seen. And then we also pivoted to a DIY kit. And the DIY kit is still our #1 seller till today. So definitely following consumer trends.
No, absolutely. That's actually something that I wrote down in my notes before. I was like, today, people don't only want to like your product. They want to like your values and what comes with the business as well. I'm going to jump into that question a little later in the conversation, but I want to pose, for the longest time, the business mantra has been, the customer is always right. Is this always true? And is there ever a time where it's important to put your company first before the customer in order to make the customer have the best experience?
I would love to chime in on this. To me, it depends on the customer, honey. It depends on the customer. I am an Asian woman. I am a first generation. My mom is a refugee from Vietnam. There are a lot of opinions in this past year about Asians, and there are certain consumers that I don't align with their opinions, and I don't necessarily want them to be a customer of mine. That's just the reality. However, before, when you say the customer is always right, we would put our business first, right? Money first, profit first, because that's how you succeed as a business person. However, I can't actually say, if you don't believe in certain values, if you look at me and you believe that I am the reason for COVID, I cannot morally serve you a cup of coffee. I cannot accept that money. And so with, again, media, our internet, access to everything, I feel like your consumer can be right. Not every consumer, not every customer is going to be right to you. And for me, where my values lie, how I run my business, I have to put my ethics first. And I do believe that business is changing. I do believe even huge corporations are taking that into account. Equity, queer rights, minorities. How can we continue to push our values at the forefront of our business and still make money? That's been such a hard balance, but in my personal experience in my business, I don't believe the customer is always right to me, to my consumer base,
Absolutely. I would say no person is ever always right. So I would just take it with a grain of salt. That's what I do. Because sometimes even when I get feedback that I don't necessarily want to hear or, might not necessarily agree with, there is a reason why this person is reaching out to you. And so even though it is kind of hard to see what at the core they are asking, I try to look at that and actually make improvements from it. Like, for example, I've had, customers say, like, I didn't know your sugar cubes weren't supposed to go into the bathtub. Maybe I'm not doing a better job in educating on how to apply it. That's just an example, but I would say I would take it with a grain of salt and really try to find the core of what they are asking and just find middle ground there. Because if anything, there's always an emotional connection that you can connect with the customer about. And that's where I just always try to lie my focuses on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tim, there was when we were doing our brief, you had mentioned it depends, if the customer is always right. If you are a smaller business, it's important that you build your team internally first so that you can have a better experience for the customer. If you want to expound on that.
Yeah, I think it has to start internally, and I really resonate with my customer being right. I think we have to start with our own internal communities first, right? Mm-hmm. And as the business leader, and I struggle with this, I have to remind myself of this multiple times every single day, which is my job is to be of service to the employees. My job is to be of service to teaching them what our culture is. My job is to make sure that they're representing our culture, to be of service through trust, transparency, and tenacity, what we refer to as the 3 T's. I have to be that every minute of every day internally so that the employees can be of service externally to the customer. And I think sometimes as business leaders, we are so busy and you have that one big account and it's Diageo, the largest alcohol company in the world, and they've got to be right all the time, right? But the reality is, you've got to, if you want to build a scalable business, us, the leaders, have to be of service to the employee so they can be of service to the customer and they can communicate and represent with that customer in a way that we can take the learning lesson that is the customer feedback. Even if we don't agree with it, we at least have to give them the space to express it and then learn from it what we as leaders think is possible. Some of which might be, that's just not my customer.
I agree.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
Sierra.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've built my whole company as our number one value is the customer is always right, unless the disrespect happens. So we get amazing feedback about our customer service to date. Like we take responsibility for, FedEx mess ups and whatever happens, we are always like, we got you. And I've trained my whole team on that. And it's done so much for us because of the reviews that I see. They're always like, wow, a small company, your size is doing better than these, multi-million dollar companies in terms of customer service. So it's worked really well for me, unless, like I said, someone really disrespected me or my staff, then just hard no. But rarely has that happened.
Absolutely. And of course, there's unique challenges that businesses of color or business owners of color face versus.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Shahira and Allison, you both share similar experiences. You had to move your businesses to be completely online due to the impacts of COVID-19. What was that experience like, making that pivot, and what were some of your strategies when you were trying to maintain your consumers?
It was devastating.
It was hard. I mean, we make cookie shot glasses, right? So people use our cookie shots for every event, party, social activity. 2019, our main business was like catering and wholesaling to hotels. So when COVID hit in March 2020, all our events canceled, all our booked catered parties canceled. I went into our production facility, laid off my entire team, crying while doing it. And then a week later, I was meditating and I came up with this DIY decorating kit idea. And I just ran some Facebook ads behind it, which is basically taking our cookie shots, adding a bag of sprinkles and chocolate and edible characters. We ran an Easter DIY kit and we sold like 400 boxes in 48 hours. And I'm like, okay, this is my sign. This is what we're going to do. And I waited 2 months to rehire my staff just to make sure that it was going to work. So we did it for Mother's Day. It worked. And then by the end of 2020, we had quadrupled our sales from 2019. So it was a great pivot and learning experience. I mean, I had to learn digital marketing and I knew nothing about digital marketing. I took like a newsletter class, a 30-day challenge. I learned Facebook ads. It was insane, but definitely worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was a very devastating, it was probably the worst and best year of my life, to be honest. I'll just never forget in my stomach when everything was happening, shutdowns were happening. I just knew that it was just going to be over. I have 4 stores, one in 2 different states. I sell direct to consumer, B2B, and then I also do a little bit of licensing. And so I'll just never forget, like the last day, I'm like, well, this is all the money that I have and it's all going to go to payroll. And after that, I have no idea what's going to happen next. And so that's just how scary and real it was for me. I took it day by day. Sometimes it was just so numbing and I felt so alone that the best I could do was just show up every day. And sometimes I didn't even do anything. As long as I just showed up to work, that's one step towards progress. And it kind of got to the point where it's just like, all right, well, if I lose this business tomorrow, what happens, right? Because that was my biggest fear, right? And that's what was kind of crippling me from making these decisions. And kind of like what Tim says, we're put in this impossible position, it seems sometimes, to do right by our employees, to do right by our customers, and to have all those people counting on you. It's just so overwhelming. And to have everything that happened during 2020, like the social pressures, all of that, it was just so overwhelming to me. And I thought, well, if I lost this all tomorrow, what do I have? I still have myself, I still have my friends, I still have my family, and I'm going to be okay. And when I kind of came to that realization that I could just build this all over again, my life is not going to be over, everything will be okay. That's just kind of when I was like, well, I'm going to give it all I got and see what happens. And so I made the impossible decision at the time to close down the stores. I felt like I was letting down a lot of people. I felt like I was letting down my customers. And after that, I was like, well, I'm going to do whatever I can to bring that experience to home. And that magical experience that they experienced in the stores, the smells, the music, everything, just the whole thing. And so that's what I decided to focus on. And we ended up doubling in sales. And not only that, but I also got a piece of my life and some, peace in me, which was, I think, huge and that I didn't have before. And I was able.
Oh no, we lost her.
Yeah, shook.
I think the courage of entrepreneurship knows no bounds.
That's what I was thinking. Like, that's why we're all on this right now, is because we pivoted, we were malleable, we did the scary thing, we continue to do the scary thing that most people are like so afraid of jumping in and making huge changes, because you could lose everything. Literally, tomorrow we could lose it all. And for us to be like, you know what, we're going to pivot. We're going to see the times of COVID. We're going to also see the times of social media. We're going to see the times of like all of this happening. I do think that that is really telling of entrepreneurship, and you have to make those hard decisions. You know, I was just piggybacking off of you, Allison, saying that like, this is why we're on this call, because we are doing the scary things. We are, you know, making the tough calls. Like, I was trying to open up a coffee shop. I couldn't, so I made it mobile. I didn't know anything about mobile shops, but I had to do it because I wanted to still serve my community. I still wanted to serve coffee. And that wasn't an easy decision. And like, being vulnerable, being raw during a really hard time is not easy to do. But I think that's what sets entrepreneurs apart, is that they're like, let's do this. Let's roll. Let's rock and roll with all this. Like, you know, and I do think that it's like super telling, Allison, that your sales doubled.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, right. Exactly. Other blessings. I want you to, you know, go back to what you were saying and finish your statement, because I know you cut out for a bit, but you know, you had a lot of blessings that happened, you know, personal and business.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Absolutely. I don't really know where I cut off, but the long story short is that at the time, I didn't know where I was going, but I just did whatever I could control, I took full control of. And I was like, the rest is out of my hands. As long as I'm showing up and doing my part, I can look back and not have any regrets and be happy with what I did and know that I did right by my employees and right by my customers. And that's all I care about at the end of the day. And so I just stuck to that, and it got me through.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why your sales double. And I think that's really important as business leaders, whether you're an entrepreneur inside a company, to always remember is the passion and enthusiasm that you bring to work every day, no matter where you are, will be felt. And the second part, and this was said earlier in the panel, and it's my favorite word, it's also the scariest word for us entrepreneurs as leaders. And the word, this is what I tell people when they go, I want to be you. And I'm like, good, I want you to memorize one word. And that word is accountability, because you're accountable for everything. You're accountable to FedEx. How am I accountable to FedEx? Like, well, the package didn't get there. So the customer has a right to be upset. So how are we going to resolve that? And I'm accountable for that. I don't get to just pass the buck. And I think as entrepreneurs, if we can keep always in our mind's eye, we are the number one cheerleader, and the energy and enthusiasm we bring will definitely go into the organization, which will definitely go to the consumer. And number two, no matter what happens, you're accountable. That's the responsibility that we each signed up for. And that's the thing.
I do agree with that, Tim. But I also think that like, we should also be accountable for being humans. Like, on our bad days, like because I don't know if I can always bring the enthusiasm or like the positivity, because I also feel like if our consumers see how hard it is for us, and that they know that we are just humans at the end of the day trying to build a brand and a business, like, of course I want to be accountable for, you know, FedEx not showing me up, or like for my employees, but I also want to show my consumers like, man, today was really shitty and I had a bad day of sales today, and how can I be better? Or, you know, like maybe I said something wrong, you know, I don't want to be canceled as a company. So how do I apologize? And how do I then say like, hey, my shipment didn't come out. Like, how do I make this up to you? I'm sorry. Like, that sucks, you know? Cause I do think, yeah, we are the top, right? Like as the owners, or as these like leaders in these companies, like we should also bring a sense of like, I love that Allison was like, I was devastated. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like that makes me feel better as a consumer too, to be like, man, she's really working her ass off there, you know? So
it was real. Like I told these people, I was like, look, like I gave you everything I have, and this is where I'm at. And so I'm going to need you to meet me halfway. or, this is what I can do. I can do X, Y, and Z, but I cannot do this because of this. And sometimes I've said that to the biggest customers even, and to the masses. And did I want to say that? Absolutely not. Did I want to make myself and my company vulnerable to our shortcomings and, things that sometimes are out of our control? Absolutely not. Was it like embarrassing? For sure. But like literally, I had nothing else to say. And I agree with you. Sometimes you just have to, I like to tell it how it is. I'm like, look, this is where I'm at. I want to help you. I really do. How can we work this out? And I've had those tough conversations too, even with my vendors, as far as like payments go, and because your customers weren't paying, because I had so many POs out that weren't even paid for like a year. I had customers go bankrupt, and so working through that was really difficult. And I think by having that emotional connection, kind of like what I was saying with the customers and vendors and everything else, that really did us a solid in COVID-19. So yeah.
One thing that I want, because I know that when it comes to, the business industry, it's so, crunching numbers and making money and things like that. But, one thing that I say to myself even is, God won't give you anything that you can't handle, period, point blank. Whoever you praise, they won't give you anything that you can't handle. So you just got to keep on pushing. I'm going to go to an audience question. Is there a way to scale without marketing? If so, what are your tips? I'll give that to Tim.
Depends on your industry,
okay.
Right? And we'll exhibit A, Mr. Musk and Tesla. He's never spent $1 single on paid advertising. Not one. Now, he did put a Tesla into outer space and got planet Earth as his backdrop, and it was a pretty good PR stunt, right? But I think it depends on your industry. And I think, for us, there are lots of tools, particularly in the digital media space, that are world-class advertising targeting tools, right? And you've got to be careful using them in an appropriate way, in a way that's not annoying to your customer, in a way that's additive. And that's really where we draw the line, is whether it's any kind of communication to the customers, are we being of service to adding value? And if the answer is yes, then let's shout it from the rooftop. And if the answer in a real way, because I agree with some of the other panelists, like you got to be real about where you're at, and the consumer, your consumer, will be forgiving and love you for it. The person who won't, that's just not meant to be your consumer, and that's okay too. And so I think that's really where it's at, is you can get away with not marketing depending on what your product is, but if you're going to do marketing, make sure that you're adding value, or don't do it.
I think there's a difference also. I think marketing is essential, but is the question putting budget into marketing? Because I started I think marketing essential, point blank, no matter what. But I have not poured a single dime into paid advertising. I grew organically my Instagram to 14K all by myself. But I took YouTube classes, I Googled, I studied other, trending companies, you can do it. You can scale, definitely, if you do it yourself. It does take much more time. It does take a lot more energy. And I know that there are tons of companies that hire out marketing agencies and stuff, but there are a lot of small businesses that do it all themselves. And that, like, for example, me, I still don't have a marketing agency. I answer all my DMs myself, things like that. But it is a lot harder to scale for sure. But I do think that marketing is essential, especially because of people just are attached to their phones 24/7. Instagram is a free commercial, baby. So if you are not marketing, that, and that's also a way to talk to your consumers directly. So it depends on the question. I think you got to do marketing, but you don't have to pay into it.
I want to add to Jackie because I built my company off Instagram the first 3 years with no marketing budget. I literally would DM celebrities left and right. I was able to get the Kardashians, Adam Sandler, Halle Berry, all these people with nothing but 8 hours of stalking a day, sending DMs to their inner circle, not to them directly, but their inner circle, which eventually got it to them. So there was some kind of strategy. But now, 6.5 years into it, I spend a lot of money on paid ads. So just because I don't have that 8 hours a day to do my stalking anymore, I've got to fundraise. can do other things.
Absolutely. And this is just a comment from someone watching. They said, Allison, you are amazing. That's from Monique.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, I have to say. And sometimes you don't hear about from entrepreneurs, but there are high highs and there are low lows. And you just got to remember who and why'd you build this company, who you are. And that will always bring you back to where you need to be. So.
Absolutely. And we actually are kind of running out of time. So I'm going to have the last question be, since you guys have built your businesses, what have been the best lessons that you have learned as a business owner that you would give insight to for other people?
Talk to as many people as possible. Sorry.
Yes. No, I agree with you. For help. You know, when I was stuck last year, I was vulnerable and just shared everything that I had. And I was like, this is where I'm at. I don't even care. I'm not even embarrassed anymore. And everyone's like, wow, me too. And I really learned a lot from it, just from talking to your peers and really being vulnerable and sharing where you are at.
Yeah, I have amazing entrepreneur friends that, you know, we're a group that just go to each other every day, every week. We have a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going through? What's going on? How can we support each other? And I think that transformed my business through their like network and their connections. When I was like, I need help with digital ads because I have no idea what I'm doing. They got me like the most amazing Facebook guy, and I've been working with him for 2 years now. He's transformed my company, right? And if it wasn't for my entrepreneur friends that I just reached out to and said, help, that would have never happened. So always ask for help and have an amazing, strong circle of entrepreneurs with you.
Also, no one knows what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing. And so we are all on the same page, honey.
I love that. And I'll sort of conclude with, for us, it's not win or lose, right? That failure is not a loss, it's win or learn. So as we don't know what we're doing, and as we're going through and it's like, that didn't work, apply the learning, tee it up again, and swing as hard as you possibly can every time.
Absolutely. Come on with the ending. Listen, I love it, Tim. Well, thank you guys so much. You guys were amazing. Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for talking to Forbes. Y'all are the next 1,000. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Now for our closing keynote conversation, business lessons from the ultimate master of scale. Please welcome Reid Hoffman, co-founder, LinkedIn, and partner, Greylock, and interviewer Maneet Ahuja, senior editor, Forbes.
We are beyond thrilled to have one of the world's most successful investors and entrepreneurs joining us now. His accomplishments are too numerous to count, but some highlights. Reid Hoffman is co-founder of LinkedIn, a partner at Greylock, a founding board member of PayPal, and sits on the board of Microsoft. He's also the best-selling author of The Startup of You, Blitzscaling, and now Masters of Scale, Surprising Truths from the World's Most Successful Entrepreneurs, which is based on his award-winning podcast. Reid, thank you so much for joining us in special conversation for our inaugural Next 1000 Summit.
It's my pleasure and honor.
You've been a big supporter of our franchise since day one, and for that, we're grateful. As one of our celebrity judges, you've given us great insight on picking 1,000 of the most intrepid business owners from across the country. So thank you so much for that.
Well, it's a great initiative and a great project.
Awesome, thank you. So we'd love to start out with the book, obviously, Masters of Scale, since that's an issue this audience is always constantly tackling as a founder. Tell us, what's the story behind the book?
Well, so I got into doing the podcast initially because I was doing Blitzscaling, and June Cohen, who's the former executive producer at TED, called me and said, would you like to do a podcast? And I was like, sure, why not? And then we were doing the podcast. And part of what we realized is we were actually there's so many different ways to fail at getting the scale, and that there was a kind of a limited number of very key tools and lessons for doing it. We said, well, okay, one set of things is the whole podcast, each one having a unique lesson. But how do you learn together as a team? How do you kind of like pull the themes out of the 100 podcast episodes and pull them together into abstract lessons? And that's why we thought, okay, let's go very retro and write a book.
That's awesome. And so who is the book written for? Why did you decide to write it? You've written a couple of other books before, you know, on the third go around. Why was this the topic that resonated the most?
So part of the question was like, how do you, the people are, whether you're entrepreneurs, always getting to scale, entrepreneurs, executives, employees working at scale efforts. By the way, the scale stuff doesn't just apply to companies, like what was happening with the vaccines during COVID. That's another blitz scaling effort. There's clearly, in order to do climate change, we're going to need to be doing blitz scaling for that, for the solutions in that as well. And so, the thought was, how do we get this kind of content out there where you kind of go, okay, what are some of the really kind of surprising things that you need to do in order to get to scale, and enable all of these audiences with that, in a way that they can kind of study it, iterate, collaborate together, kind of say, oh, I think Reed's wrong about this thing on page 40, which is great, right?
Yeah.
That's part of it, to always be learning.
Well, that's what I love too about it, because the path of an entrepreneur can be very lonely, right? And every situation is unique. So in some ways, you do need to crowdsource ideas in order to get amazing feedback or usable feedback. And so many people don't have access to the top VCs in the world that are looking to start businesses, especially small business owners. And so one of the things I would love to know from you is, what do you think are some things that entrepreneurs get wrong about scaling their businesses?
Well, the most frequent one is this kind of myth that you have to get your initial product market fit, and then it's just execution to scale. And it doesn't realize that all kinds of things change at each level of scale. Your go-to-market might change, your business model might change, certainly your internal organization, the way you recruit, the way you manage, the way you move from single-threaded to multi-threaded. All of these things change as you get to scale. And like, for example, one of the classic kind of things that we kind of beat the drum on and have a whole chapter on in the book is this learn to unlearn. Because you think, oh, I learned that, I'm done. And it's like, no, actually, in fact, the new game has some family resemblance to the old game, but it's a new game. And you sometimes have to unlearn earlier lessons in order to learn like how to succeed at the new level of scale.
Mm-hmm. That's such a smart point, right? Because you would think that, what took you steps 1 through 10 will take you to 10 to 20, but the foundation has changed, right? So you're not even just like, you just take a prescription medicine, right? It doesn't work and you build immunity to it. So it's kind of the same concept.
Exactly. It's kind of the question, you have to constantly be evolving and changing the game, which is one of the reasons why the learning clock for executives, for employees, for founders is the most important thing on the entrepreneurial journey.
Mm-hmm. And so what are some of the other most important takeaways from the book?
Well, we kind of try to put some of the different kind of elements together that make people go, oh, that's really interesting, and think of doing it. So like, for example, classically, when you're an entrepreneur, this is why we open the first chapter with this, which is you kind of like learn from no's. Because you say, no, what you want is yes. You want everyone saying yes. And by the way, of course, that's always helpful if employees and investors and everyone else always say yes. The vast majority of cases say no. How do you learn from that? It's almost like, how do you leverage a good crisis? But how do you learn from that? How do you amplify? How do you get a higher likelihood on target? Another one is kind of like the centrality of mission to actually being able to successfully scale. Because people, like when they go, oh yeah, this is the kind of thing this is the change in the world that we want to see, then the culture that you establish is much healthier. Everyone rows in the same direction. They're proud of it when they're talking to their friends and family. Later, they say, no, this thing that we're doing is really important in the world, and this is why. And so that's why it's kind of the last chapter, the Trojan horse, which is to always have the mission be part of what you're doing. Anyway, so there's a whole stack of them, and obviously we could take days.
We could go through it over a period of weeks or days. So what's some of the advice in the book that's you think hardest to follow or most counterintuitive, right?
Well, so I think, the learn unlearn is usually like is definitely, because you got to go, oh, well, I learned it, so I know what to do. And you're like, no, you actually have to learn new things, and they will change some of the old ones. I think also, kind of like part of the reason why we opened the very first Master to Scale podcast, the very first one was Brian Chesky, was that they're kind of like, oh, only do things at scale. And it's like, well, actually, in fact, if you do that, you'll frequently not figure out some really critical things that you'll later figure out how to scale. So the Brian Chesky principle of 11-star design, where you kind of figure out, okay, I can't do that, but I can do this 7-star thing. and I can do it this way that will really scale. And so doing those handcrafted things that you know won't scale, to experiment and learn on the path to figure out what is most critical to scale. That's a frequent counterintuitive lesson that the engineering or the systems mindset doesn't get.
And is that it sounds like that's earlier to do at the onset rather than as you're further along, right? Because the train is already moving forward, it's out of the station. In some ways, at the beginning, you don't know what's going to work, what's not going to work, right?
Yes, exactly. And but it goes along, because like, for example, you say, well, we've now got this thing scaling, but maybe this new feature or this new product extension or something else. And you might go back to doing handcrafted then, even when you're a company of 400 people, you're doubling your employee base and you're doing this. So it isn't only the first thing. It's kind of multiple learning moments along the journey of the company.
And so now that the book is out, and I've had this from my own personal experience, and you've been getting feedback, have you realized that there's anything you're like, oh man, I wish I added X, or I wish I added Y, or I clarified this or that? Have you had that experience?
Well, I always have that experience because you're always trying to learn. I'd say my experience was probably, and maybe what we're doing today is part of the learning from this, is that not only to do audio and not only to do written, but also do video. Like, I think I should have done some more video kind of lessons around the book, maybe, kind of getting some kind of cameos, because some people learn by reading, some people learn by listening, some people learn by watching and listening to a lecture. And I'd say like some access there is one of the things that I've been most recently thinking about.
So is that a little bit of a clue as to a new project that might be forthcoming, or am I reading into that?
Well, if time were infinite, certainly, right? The prioritization is one of the key things. We definitely will do, I think, a follow-on book at some point in the next few years, because we had a lot of different themes that we thought were important. When you kind of collapse to 10, you're kind of like, well, the 11th and the 12th was really hard. And as we get new interviews with a broader scope of folks, not just within the kind of iconic large tech companies, but a broader range of scale entrepreneurship, that adds in new lessons as well. As you move from software to hardware, from bits to atoms. So
yeah,
we will have more.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, it might be interesting for the companies just under that unicorn status that are looking to break through, right?
Yes.
But you know better than most, isn't that? You've seen them all, so you probably have a running list already. But if there's one conversation from Masters of Scale that you think every entrepreneur should listen to, I've heard you refer to the Brian Chesky interview a lot, but which one would it be and why?
Well, let me give two. So one of them, I think, was kind of on a personal surprise note, was Tyra Banks. And I think that one would thought that she went into becoming a supermodel and everything else just by being like absolutely gorgeous and everything else. And actually, she approached the whole thing with an entrepreneurial mindset. And part of what we're trying to do with Masters of Scale and with the book and everything else is show that the entrepreneurial mindset can work everywhere. And that gave an example, like how she approached her modeling career. And it's replete with how she then starts doing entrepreneurship afterwards and doing A/B testing, experimenting and market work and all the rest. So I think, Tyra's, kind of work and contribution, kind of is stunning and good. And then, I think also, basically, all of these are great. I think that when we, like, for example, like Barry Diller's Learn, Unlearn. We had a couple of different ones on culture with Anil Busri and Reed Hastings. Like, I think there's a stack of them. And, like one of the classic pieces of advice I give an entrepreneur is raise more money than you think that you need. And like Miriam Nafisi very early on was kind of key on this as well. So I think that's, that gives some scope, but obviously we're very selective in who we actually go do interviews with. So we're proud of all of our children.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure you get this question a lot. One person that I'm curious that you learned from is Elon Musk, who I know that you have a long relationship with from your days working at PayPal. What are some of the lessons that you learned from speaking to him? And also another one of our next 1,000 judges, Melody Hobson. Would love to hear some of those takeaways.
So Elon, the principal thing actually, when you look at where Elon has been just like 100 out of 10 successful and pulling off magic tricks, is going against bad competition, right? So the auto industry, basically buried electric cars because they wanted to just keep their franchise going. And so, kind of getting out of the pack, doing electric cars, moving from a mechanical engineering paradigm to a software paradigm, an electric paradigm, was one of the things that, kind of stunning. Obviously, similar things around rockets and having these companies that had spent decades doing no R&D. And then with Melody, there's a whole stack of things. I mean, we kind of, Melody has such deep expertise and a learning approach to boards, and boards are so important. So there's a whole bunch of things about how to onboard board members and how to have the right kind of set of board perspectives in order to have the right kind of governance. And then of course, Melody's iconic thing is, don't think about diversity as something you want as blindness, like, oh, we don't see race, oh, we don't see gender, but to bring it in a way that makes you higher performance. And Melody has a set of great points on that. Some of it we captured on the podcast, some of which obviously in our iconic TED Talk. But those would be just two of these the many mentors that I have as I learn.
Awesome. And so one of the questions that I get a lot when I'm speaking to founders who are like, okay, well, I can't get in front of the Greylocks or the Sequoias or the other big VCs. What do they tell you? Well, how do they determine which ideas are worth investing in? How do I get on their radar as a business? Are there certain criteria that you have to meet?
Well, so, I mean, look, the classic course is a massive market, a new unique plan shot on it, technological shift in plan, and then the right kind of entrepreneurial skills and team to potentially pull off these heroic journeys. And, one of the challenges, of course, when dealing with VCs is, your average general partner at a top tier firm will look at 800 deals a year and say yes to up to 2 of them. Right. So it's kind of this challenge. And then by the way, have thousands come in. So the usual thing is that why is at least the area that I look at is, why is the thing that you're thinking about contrarian, but potentially right. So people, it's not quite in the beaten path. Your inbox gets full of, it's AI, but for board games, right? You're like, okay, everyone in the world is AI these days. So what's your unique thing that's really interesting at scale that other people think, well, maybe that's not a good idea, but if it turns out to be a good idea, might be an amazing idea, right? Which is one of the things that attracted me to Airbnb in the beginning.
Have you noticed that it evokes a specific feeling, or is it exclusively also based on a company's ability to scale and, overall market opportunity?
Well, you have to have a theory by which it could be huge. It's simply not worth again, in that kind of saying yes to up to 2 out of 800, you have to have it could be huge. Sometimes it's because, oh, this person has this really unique access and has this amazing talent, and we'll do because Greylock, we do a lot of very seed investing, and so that frequently is there's a vision, an envelope, like a napkin, and 3 people with an idea, and then how do you build it? But sometimes it's there's a technological change that technological change is going to transform one or more industries, and you're at the leading edge of that technological change. You have a unique ability to understand how that's going to affect an industry. Again, Airbnb is an example. But there's many examples of that. Similarly, Zynga or LinkedIn or others, PayPal, and so those are the kinds of things that you would kind of look at. And frequently, the thing is, be very ambitious, but don't be ambitious in a way that this will be huge. You're like, no. Why will it be huge? What's the theory of the game? What's the insight that you have that would lead this to being huge that many other smart people wouldn't have?
So I want to shift a little bit, because I know we're almost out of time, to you personally, right? Because sitting right in front of this audience here, like I mentioned at the intro, you yourself are one of the most successful entrepreneurs and investors of all time. But do you have any major regrets as an investor? Either a company that you bet on that you shouldn't have, or a company that you had the opportunity to invest in but didn't?
Well, actually, the ones that you invested in that failed are not the really big ones. The really big misses are the ones that are huge that you didn't bet on. You know, and I obviously, like many smart, self-reflective people, have a large list of those. Maybe the right one to mention is Pinterest, because the angel round came into my office at LinkedIn, the Series A came into my office, and I just didn't understand how it was a new medium for communication and discovery and so forth. I thought, oh, it was a feature, not a platform, not a medium. And despite really liking, you know, Ben and Paul, it was like, nah, I don't get it. And yeah, well, I didn't get it. It was awesome.
Any other ones that you walked away from that maybe you thought back on that you should have invested in?
Oh, I'm sure there's others. Let's see. So, you know, like I wasn't wrong to not do Odd Blog, which was audio blogging, even though we later kind of obviously have podcasting and so forth. But when it shifted to Twitter, I didn't get it. And by the time I got it, it was when it was already, you know, large and huge, because the question of how do you have a kind of a global communications scheme around all this. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I went back and looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, that one. Stripe, you know, the Collisons and the vision.
Yeah.
Because of my experience with PayPal, I was like, well, no, this is brutally hard. And yes, it is brutally hard, but they are also amazingly good. You know, so it just kind of you know, any reflective investor, you know, this list will actually go on and on.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's like the muscle memory works to your advantage, but sometimes, you know, like we said, the foundation is always different. It's a different time period. There are different players in the marketplace. Sometimes that's not the case, right? So, I mean, all you can do is make your best move, and you've made many. So I know, you know, we only have time for one last question. You founded your first company, SocialNet, an online dating website on matching people with similar interests, all the way back in 1997. I know because I actually knew about this story before, because I was working on a book proposal, and I had looked into all of the work that you had done on it. It was called An Idea Before Its Time. What inspired you to start your very first business, and what did you learn from that experience?
And a week later, he finishes answering the question. So what inspired me was this notion that our real life together with the internet, amplifying our real life, is the thing that most matters. Obviously, this goes on in the various things that I've done, from, you know, LinkedIn to, you know, PayPal, Airbnb, etc. And then the principal thought was, look, there's a set of things. Dating is one, roommates, activity partners, you know, golf, tennis, etc. How do you find the right person to kind of share this experience with? And I had this whole idea, which I think is still a very good one, about how to do profiling and all the rest. And then all the learnings were, well, don't invent the product without inventing the go-to-market. My whole thing about be embarrassed by your first product release, you know, as an emphasis on speed, is the kind of thing that is so you know, kind of important to and speed of execution and speed of learning from your customers is so important for these journeys to scale and so forth. And it just kind of went on and on. I mean, during SocialNet, literally every Friday, and it wasn't like, oh, you know, so-and-so returning your phone call or not. There were things about how to play the game that I wish I had known on Monday. Like that's the nature of the learning curve.
All right, Reed. Well, thank you so much. I think we're out of time. I wish we had an hour or 2 hours, or could do our own podcast, because I have a whole laundry list of other questions that I wish I had the opportunity to ask, but I think we will leave it there. Thanks again for being a judge since day one on Next 1000, and we look forward to doing more together.
Likewise. And, you know, this conversation will continue. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Now for closing remarks, please welcome Maneet Ahuja, Senior Editor, Forbes.
Well, what an incredible event. We've heard from some of the most successful business leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs in the world this afternoon, as well as many of our Next 1000 All-Stars. A big thank you to you all for joining us as we celebrated our inaugural Next 1000 franchise. and all the tremendous success of small business owners across the country. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Square. I hope you all are leaving reinvigorated and inspired to make your business dreams a reality. Have a great afternoon.
That concludes